My name is Elias. I'm 24, and the night I came home to find my room stripped bare still feels like a scene burned into my memory. Clothes that had once been folded in drawers were scattered on the damp grass like trash someone forgot to collect. My shoes, books, and even an old guitar I had bought with my first paycheck leaned crooked against the mailbox. And there was my dad, standing at the doorway with his arms crossed, his face set in that sharp, stone-carved expression I'd grown up fearing more than I'd ever admit. He didn't yell, didn't rant, didn't even give me one of his long lectures about how I was a disappointment. He just tossed the last box onto the lawn, dusted his hands, and said, "You're not welcome here anymore." Then he turned his back on me, like I was a guest who had overstayed my welcome rather than his son. I remember standing there, keys in my hand, looking at the house I grew up in and realizing I wasn't shocked. Not really. Hurt, yes. Humiliated, even more, but not shocked. For years, my dad's approval had been a moving target I could never quite hit. If I worked overtime, he said I was neglecting family. If I studied late, he'd call me lazy for not working more. No matter how carefully I tried to live, he'd always find a way to tilt his head, sigh, and remind me how much better my brother was doing, how much faster my cousin had climbed the ladder, how much more obedient the neighbor's kids seemed. That night was just the culmination of years of small cuts, years of being chipped away piece by piece until there was nothing left of me that fit his definition of a worthy son. It wasn't always this bad. Growing up, I remember my dad being strict, yes, but not cruel. He was a man who believed in rules and hard work, and I thought that if I followed the script, I'd earn his respect. But somewhere around high school, the comparisons began to sharpen. My younger brother, Caleb, was the golden child, athletic, charming, the kind of person teachers would gush about at parent-teacher conferences. I was quieter, more bookish, always working part-time jobs to support myself while trying to study. And while my mom tried to soften the blow with little reassurances, she was often silent when Dad tore into me. Her silence, I realized later, was its own kind of betrayal. The first hint that things were slipping beyond repair came the year I turned 19. I had scraped together savings from 2 jobs to buy a used car, nothing flashy, but mine. The day I pulled into the driveway, proud of finally having something to my name, Dad didn't even look at the car. Instead, he pointed at Caleb, who had been lounging on the porch, and said, "Now that's how you should carry yourself. Confident, easygoing. Not uptight like you." Caleb smirked and made some half-hearted joke, and they both laughed. I stood there, keys in hand, feeling like I'd stepped into the wrong script. It wasn't about the car. It was about me never being enough. From then on, things snowballed. Every accomplishment of mine was invisible, swallowed in the shadow of my brother's charm. I paid for most of my college tuition myself, but Dad said I was wasting money on books when I should be learning a trade like a real man. When I came home late from shifts, he'd lock the door and make me sleep in my car because a son who can't respect curfew doesn't deserve a bed. I learned to stop expecting fairness or even basic decency. But still, I stayed. Because that's what you're supposed to do, right? You grit your teeth, you hold your tongue, you try harder. That's why, standing in front of the house with my life scattered on the lawn, I didn't argue. I didn't beg or defend myself. I just nodded, grabbed my keys, and loaded what I could into my trunk. There was a strange kind of peace in leaving without a word, as though silence was the only power I had left. I drove off into the night not knowing exactly where I was headed, but certain of one thing. I wasn't coming back. Not like this. But as the weeks turned into months, and the months into 8 long stretches of rebuilding my life piece by piece, something shifted. I worked harder than ever, not for Dad's approval this time, but for myself. I carved out a life that didn't depend on his nod or his rare, begrudging praise. I stayed quiet, didn't reach out, didn't explain where I went or how I was doing. And for a long while, there was silence from him too. Until one day, my phone lit up with the first of many messages. Then dozens more. Until it reached 72 in total. Each one more desperate than the last. Each one ending with the same plea. "Please come back." That's when I realized the story wasn't over. Not even close. I didn't answer the messages at first. Part of me wanted to throw the phone across the room every time it buzzed with another, "Please come back," or "We miss you." But another part of me, the scarred, younger version of myself that had always craved approval, read every word. turning them over like sharp stones in my hand. Because when I looked closer, I noticed something. Those messages weren't just apologies. They weren't even real apologies. They were carefully worded hooks, the kind my dad had used my whole life. Please come back. Your mother is worried. We miss you. The family's not the same without you. Stop punishing us for one mistake. The same old script. He wasn't saying, I'm sorry I threw you out. He was saying, look at what you're doing to us. And that was when I felt the familiar knot of manipulation tightening again. To understand why those messages cut so deep, I need to go back to those months before I left, when the favoritism in my family had become so blatant it was almost theatrical. My brother Caleb wasn't just the favorite. He was the family's investment. Dad poured money into his hobbies, his car, his half-hearted business ideas. If Caleb wanted something, Dad found a way. But when I asked for help, once, just once, with tuition after my hours at work got cut, Dad laughed in my face. He said, if you can't pay for it yourself, maybe it's not worth studying. A week later, Caleb announced he was going on a trip to Miami with friends, and Dad handed him an envelope of cash like it was a rite of passage. It wasn't just the money. It was the way they spoke about us when we weren't in the room. Once, I overheard Dad telling a neighbor, Caleb, now he's got potential. Elias? He means well, but he'll never be more than average. I remember standing behind the door, my hands trembling, realizing that no matter what I did, no matter how hard I worked, I'd never escape that label in his eyes. And when I confronted him about it later, his response was simple. If you don't like what I say, prove me wrong. That phrase haunted me. Prove me wrong. But whenever I tried, he moved the finish line farther away. The last holiday I spent at home before everything exploded made it painfully clear. It was Christmas Eve, and I'd saved up to buy gifts for everyone, even Dad. I'd spent hours picking out things they'd actually use, things I thought would make them feel cared for. When it came time to exchange, Caleb's gift, a cheap cologne set he'd grabbed last minute, was met with applause, laughter, even a toast to his thoughtfulness. Mine? Dad barely glanced at it before setting it aside. Later that night, when I asked if he liked it, he shrugged and said, it's fine. You could have saved your money. Those words stuck in my throat like gravel. So when I saw those 72 messages lighting up my phone months later, I couldn't help but hear the echo of all those moments. The manipulation was familiar, rehearsed. He wasn't reaching out to me as his son. He was reaching out because something in his world had shifted and he needed me back to balance it. Maybe Caleb had disappointed him. Maybe the image of the perfect family had cracked. Whatever it wasn't about love. It was about control. I still remember the first time he tried calling instead of texting. My phone buzzed on the table, his name flashing across the screen, and I just sat there staring. I didn't answer, but I listened to the voicemail. His voice, usually sharp and commanding, sounded thinner this time. Elias, he said, we need to talk. Don't be stubborn. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Just come home, and we'll sort things out. Caleb misses you too. And there it was again, that subtle twist. Not, I miss you, but you're being stubborn. Not, we were wrong, but you're making it harder. The same script, different stage. And yet, despite knowing all of this, I felt the tension inside me rising. Because while I had started building a life of my own, tiny apartment, steady job, quiet routines, I still carried the weight of those years on my back. I wondered if ignoring him made me as cruel as he had been. I wondered if maybe, just maybe, this time he meant it. But deep down, I knew better. I knew what was waiting for me if I walked back through that door. The favoritism, the cutting remarks, the constant reshaping of my worth into something I could never meet. And I knew something else too. The more desperate he became, the more unreasonable he would get. And I had no idea just how far he was willing to go to pull me back under his control. That realization hit me hardest the night my mom finally sent me a message of her own, one that made my chest tighten in a way Dad's never could. The message from my mom came late, just after midnight. I was lying on the couch in my apartment, half asleep with the TV buzzing low in the background, when my phone lit up. For a second, I thought it was another one of Dad's relentless texts. But when I saw it was from Mom, my heart gave that strange, uneasy jolt. Her message was short, almost too short. Elias, we need to talk. Your father made a decision about your things. Call me tomorrow. My things. I sat up straight, wide awake now, dread washing over me. I had thought everything was already gone. The clothes tossed on the lawn, the books and guitar I'd salvaged, the few boxes I had squeezed into the trunk of my car. What else could she mean? I called her immediately, but she didn't pick up. The next morning, I tried again. That time, she answered. Her voice was tight, almost whispery, like she was afraid someone might overhear. Elias, she said, your father, he sold the rest of your stuff. The boxes you left in the garage, the computer, your old files, even the desk you bought when you started school. He said you weren't coming back, so there was no point keeping it. I felt my chest cave in. My computer, years of work, photos, writings, everything gone. I had saved it in the garage because I thought maybe, just maybe, when things cooled down, I could come back for it. And my dad had just erased it all in a single, calculated move. Why didn't you stop him? I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. Her answer came after a long pause. You know how he is, Elias. Once he makes up his mind, there's no changing it. I didn't want to make things worse. I closed my eyes, feeling that old familiar anger, the kind that made my hands shake. Because this wasn't just about property. This wasn't about old furniture or boxes. It was about years of my life, memories, achievements, records, all treated like garbage. And hearing my mom excuse it, yet again, twisted the knife even deeper. She had always been the quiet one, the peacekeeper. But peacekeeping, I realized, was just another word for abandoning me when it counted most. Later that day, I confirmed it for myself. My cousin, who lived down the street, sent me a photo he'd taken of a yard sale sign in front of our house. Tables covered in random items, my old textbooks, framed photos, even the chess set my grandfather had given me before he passed. The caption underneath read, "Your dad's clearinghouse. Thought you should know." I don't know how long I sat staring at that photo, but when I finally looked away, something in me had changed. Up until then, I had carried a fragile thread of hope, that maybe things weren't completely broken, that maybe if I stayed away long enough, they would learn to value me. But watching strangers walk away with pieces of my life was the moment the thread snapped. It wasn't just disrespect anymore. It was betrayal. It was deliberate, personal. That night, Dad sent another message. This one was longer than the usual one-liners. You're being dramatic. Those things were just clutter, and you weren't here to take care of them. Caleb's moving into your old room, and we need the space. It's time you stopped acting like the victim and grew up. I read it twice, my vision blurring with anger. He hadn't just erased me from the house. He had replaced me. My brother, the golden child, was now sleeping in the room I had spent years calling mine, surrounded by the scraps of what was once my life. My dad hadn't just thrown me out. He had rewritten the script so I'd never existed there in the first place. I wanted to scream, to call him, to unload everything I had bottled up over the years. But I didn't, because beneath the anger, something colder was beginning to form, a resolve I'd never felt before. If my father thought he could erase me so easily, he was wrong. He could sell my desk, my books, my photos, but he couldn't take away the life I was building outside his walls. And for the first time, I wasn't just going to survive his cruelty. I was going to make him regret it. But before that moment of clarity came the hardest blow yet, the one that made me realize how much lower they were willing to go. And it arrived in the form of another message, this time from Caleb himself. Caleb's message came on a Sunday afternoon, when I was finally settling into the rhythm of my own life. I had just gotten home from a double shift, the kind of day that left me bone-tired but strangely satisfied, because unlike before, every dollar I earned was mine. Every small success belonged to me. I remember making a cup of cheap instant coffee, sinking into my couch, and then hearing the chime of my phone. For a moment, I debated ignoring it. But when I saw his name on the screen, I couldn't resist. The message was short. Smug. Thanks for the room, bro. Finally fixed it up the way it should have been. Don't worry, I tossed the old junk. Place looks great now. I sat there, staring at the screen, my jaw clenched so hard it ached. It wasn't just the words. It was the casual arrogance, the way he twisted the knife without even trying to hide it. My brother, the one who had always coasted on charm and favoritism, was now living in the room I had been thrown out of, surrounded by the ashes of my past. My old posters, the shelves I built by hand, the small things I had collected to make that space mine, they were gone. And now he was rubbing it in my face, like I had been some temporary tenant who finally made way for the rightful heir. I didn't reply. I couldn't. My hands shook too much to type. Instead, I scrolled through his social media later that night, something I had avoided since leaving home. And there it was, photo after photo of Caleb standing in what used to be my room. He had painted the walls a new color, rearranged everything, and filled it with sleek furniture Dad had obviously paid for. In one post, the caption read, "Finally got the upgrade I deserve." In another, someone commented, "Isn't that your brother's old room?" Caleb's reply was a smirking emoji followed by, "Not anymore." That was the moment I hit rock bottom. It wasn't just that I had lost my home. It was that I had lost my place in the family entirely. They weren't waiting for me to come back. They weren't missing me. They had erased me, painted over my existence, and handed it all to Caleb with a bow on top. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my tiny apartment, listening to the hum of the fridge and the occasional honk from the street outside. The loneliness pressed down on me, heavier than ever. For years, I had endured mistreatment because I still clung to the hope that I mattered to them. That one day, if I worked hard enough, if I proved myself enough, they'd see me differently. But now, I understood. I had never been the son they wanted. I had only been a placeholder until Caleb took center stage. The next few weeks blurred together. I went to work, came home, ate, and repeated the cycle. I didn't talk to anyone, didn't go out, didn't answer texts from the few friends who still checked in. I told myself I was too busy, too tired. But the truth was, I didn't know who I was outside of the constant battle for my family's approval. And without them in the picture, I felt hollow. But even in that emptiness, a quiet resolve began to take root. The kind that doesn't announce itself with grand speeches or sudden decisions. It was subtle, like embers glowing under ash. I started saving more aggressively, cutting out every unnecessary expense. I took on extra shifts, even when my body screamed for rest. And slowly, I began to piece together a plan. Not revenge, at least not yet. Just survival. Just the simple determination to stand on my own, so that when the time came, I would no longer need anything from them. In those silent nights, when the weight of everything felt unbearable, I made myself a promise. I would never again beg for a place in a family that had thrown me out. I would build a life so steady, so untouchable, that they could never take it away from me. It wasn't easy. There were days when I wanted to give up, when the memories of my dad's voice telling me I'd never amount to anything echoed so loudly I almost believed him. But I kept moving, step by step, shift by shift. And while I didn't realize it at the time, every small act of survival was also an act of quiet defiance. Still, I didn't know that my father's grip on control was loosening, and his desperation was only beginning to show. And when his desperation finally collided with the fragile life I was building, everything shifted. The first flicker of change came in the most unexpected way. I had been working at a logistics company as a warehouse assistant, stacking boxes and managing inventory. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and it paid my bills. One afternoon, my manager pulled me aside after a long shift and said, "Elias, you've got an eye for detail. You ever thought about moving up into operations?" I didn't know how to answer at first. Me? The one who had been told his whole life he was average at best. But she was serious. She told me a supervisor position was opening, and while it meant longer hours, it also came with better pay, benefits, and a chance to grow. For the first time in years, someone saw value in me. Not because of Caleb's shadow, not because of Dad's impossible standards, but because of me. I took the job. The first few weeks were tough, learning schedules, managing people, making quick decisions under pressure. But something surprising happened. I thrived. I found myself solving problems on the fly, coordinating shipments, and even earning the respect of workers twice my age. For once, I wasn't the overlooked one. I wasn't less than. I was the one people turned to when things got complicated. The pay raise meant I could finally move out of the cramped studio apartment. I found a modest one-bedroom across town, nothing fancy, but when I walked through the door with the keys in my hand, it felt like the world's quietest victory. No one had handed it to me. No one could take it away. It was mine. With the stability came confidence. I reconnected with old friends I'd pushed away during my lowest point. I stopped dodging their calls and started showing up again, grabbing coffee, laughing, remembering what it felt like to belong somewhere. And slowly, the emptiness I had carried since leaving home began to feel less suffocating. At work, I pushed myself further. I signed up for training courses, learned more about supply chains and logistics systems. Before long, I was the one proposing solutions in meetings, and people actually listened. My manager, impressed with my progress, started hinting at more opportunities down the line. For the first time in my life, the future didn't feel like a wall closing in. It felt wide open. And then, almost by accident, I stumbled into something bigger. A client company I had worked with regularly needed extra help coordinating a major shipment. I stayed late, worked through the night, and made sure everything ran smoothly. The head of their team noticed, and after a brief conversation, they offered me a position with their firm, better salary, better growth, more independence. It felt surreal, like doors were swinging open faster than I could walk through them. Within a year, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. I had savings in the bank, a reliable car, and the kind of independence I had only dreamed of. The voice of my father telling me I'd never amount to anything grew quieter each day, replaced by the steady hum of progress. And yet, even as I built this new life, their presence lingered. Dad's texts hadn't stopped. If anything, they had grown more frequent and desperate. It's been long enough. Stop holding a grudge. Your brother asks about you. Each one dripped with the same mix of manipulation and entitlement, as if my silence was the real betrayal. But here's the thing. I didn't need him anymore. For the first time, I held the power. I had proven him wrong, not by shouting back, not by begging for recognition, but by living a life without him. And that power, the quiet, steady kind, was intoxicating. It wasn't just about money or independence. It was about control. For the first time in my life, I wasn't at the mercy of my father's approval. I could choose when to answer, when to ignore, when to walk away. And deep down, I began to wonder what it would look like to flip the script entirely, to let him see what he had lost. That thought grew stronger with every unanswered message, every voicemail deleted. And it grew even stronger the day I saw my brother Caleb's name appear on my phone again. This time not to gloat, but to ask for help. It was a Tuesday evening when Caleb's name lit up my phone again. But this time, there was no smug caption attached, no photo of him flaunting my old room. Instead, it was a plain text. Can we talk? It's important. For a moment, I thought it was some kind of trick, another jab meant to drag me back into the cycle of comparison and humiliation. But something about the wording felt different. Urgent. Hesitant. Against my better judgment, I replied with a single word, why? His answer came quickly. Things aren't going well here. Dad's been different. Can we meet? I almost laughed. The same brother who had paraded through my old space like it was a prize, who had never once defended me when Dad tore me down, was now reaching out. But curiosity got the better of me. A week later, I agreed to meet him at a quiet coffee shop downtown. When I walked in, I hardly recognized him. Caleb, who had always carried himself with that effortless swagger, looked worn down. His clothes were as stylish as ever, but his posture was slumped, his eyes heavy with something I had never seen on him before, fear. He didn't waste time. Elias, he said, leaning forward, Dad's in trouble. The business, it's collapsing. He made some bad investments. He's been borrowing money left and right, and now people are asking questions. I let the words sink in. Dad, the man who had mocked me for being average, who had worshipped success like a religion, was failing. The same father who had sold my belongings without a second thought, who had erased me from his home, was now watching his empire crumble. And I asked, keeping my voice even. Caleb rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. He's desperate. He keeps saying if you came back, it would fix things. That you'd help out. Maybe take on some of the debt. He thinks you've been saving, maybe earning more than you let on. There it was. The real reason behind those 72 messages. The desperate voicemails. The sudden, almost pleading tone. It had nothing to do with missing me. Nothing to do with family. It was about money. It was about control. He had thrown me out when I was of no use to him. And now that his foundation was cracking, he wanted me back as a pillar to hold it up. I didn't answer right away. I let Caleb keep talking. He told me about arguments at home, about Dad snapping at Mom over small things, about the tension that filled the house like smoke. Caleb confessed he was scared, that he had relied too heavily on Dad's support and now found himself cornered. It was strange listening to him. For the first time, I wasn't the powerless one. I wasn't the one begging to be heard. Caleb, my father's golden child, was sitting across from me, practically wringing his hands, while I sat calm, steady, untouched by the storm tearing through their lives. And in that moment, I realized something important. I had leverage, not just over Caleb, but over Dad himself. The years of humiliation, the dismissal, the betrayal, it had all flipped. They needed me now, and I didn't need them. That was power. Quiet, deliberate, undeniable power. When I left the coffee shop, Caleb tried one last time. "Think about it," he said. "Dad keeps saying family has to stick together. He'll forgive everything if you just come back." I smiled faintly, not out of amusement, but out of the bitter irony of it all. Dad wasn't offering forgiveness. He was begging for mine, though he'd never admit it. And that gave me the upper hand in a way I never imagined I'd have. As I walked back to my car, the plan began to form. Not fully, not yet, but the outline of something sharp and satisfying. I wasn't going to be the desperate son standing in the rain outside my own house anymore. This time, I was going to decide how the story ended. And when I finally checked my phone that night, there it was again, another message from Dad, this one longer than usual. "Elias, come home. We need you. I made mistakes, but we're still family. You're still my son." For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the pull of those words. I felt something else entirely, a calm certainty that the tables had turned. I didn't respond to Dad's message right away. Instead, I let it sit there, glowing on my phone like a beacon of irony. For years, I had begged for a fraction of his attention, a crumb of recognition. Now, he was the one reaching out, and I was the one deciding whether his words had any weight at all. The balance of power had shifted, and I wasn't about to waste the moment. The first step was patience. Revenge, real revenge, wasn't about shouting or slamming doors. It was about silence, about making them stew in the consequences of their own choices. So I ignored him. Days passed, then weeks. The messages grew more frantic, more emotional. "I know I was hard on you. You can't hold this grudge forever. Don't punish the family for my mistakes." It was the same script he had always used, but now I was no longer a captive audience. Then came the opportunity one had been waiting for. Through Caleb's scattered updates and a few well-placed questions to people I still knew in town, I learned that Dad's financial troubles were worse than he let on. The small contracting business he had run for decades was teetering on bankruptcy. Word was spreading fast, clients pulling out, suppliers demanding payment, debts piling high. And the more desperate he became, the more he tried to hide it, clinging to his pride like it was the last piece of wood in a sinking ship. That's when I decided to act. I had been saving diligently, investing cautiously, and with my new job and steady promotions, I had quietly built a financial cushion. Not millions, but enough to matter. Enough to show I had done what Dad always swore I couldn't: create stability on my own. And now, I would use it not to bail him out, but to expose the lie he had been living. The next time Caleb reached out, I agreed to meet him again. This time, I was different, calmer, sharper, carrying myself with the kind of quiet authority that comes when you know you're the one holding the cards. We sat across from each other, and before he could start pleading on Dad's behalf, I laid it out. "Caleb," I said, "you wanted me to come back, to help. But you need to understand something. I'm not the same person who walked out of that house 8 months ago. I don't owe Dad anything. Not after he threw me out, sold my things, erased me. If I do anything, it won't be for him. It will be for me." He shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure of what I meant. So I leaned in. "I know about the debts. I know the business is failing. And I know Dad's been telling people he can fix it if I come back. But here's the truth. I could help. I could write a check today and stabilize everything. And I'm not going to." The look on Caleb's face was almost enough on its own. Shock, fear, a flash of recognition that the brother he had dismissed for years was now the one in control. "But here's what I will do," I continued. "I'll make sure everyone knows the truth. That Dad's not the invincible man he pretends to be. That he gambled everything away and lost. And when people ask why I didn't step in, I'll tell them, because when I needed him, he tossed me onto the lawn like garbage." Caleb tried to interrupt, stammering something about family and forgiveness, but I cut him off. "No, family isn't something you erase when it's inconvenient. Family isn't something you sell at a yard sale. Dad made his choice. Now he can live with it." I walked out before he could respond, the weight of years of humiliation finally lifting with each step. For once, I wasn't reacting. I was leading. And that night, when Dad called again, I finally answered. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I spoke with the calmness of someone who had already won. You always told me to prove you wrong, I said. Well, I did. I built a life without you. And now, when you need me most, I'm proving something else. You can't erase me and then come crawling back when it's convenient. You made your choice. This is mine. Then I hung up. The silence that followed was more powerful than any argument we had ever had. For the first time, I wasn't the powerless son trying to earn his place. I was the one closing the door. But revenge has a way of rippling out farther than you expect. And what happened next in the family, the fallout I hadn't even planned, was more devastating than anything I could have orchestrated myself. When I hung up that night, I thought the story was finished, that my silence and refusal were the final word. But what I didn't realize was that my father's world was already crumbling, and my choice not to save him didn't just seal his fate. It accelerated it. Within weeks, the news began to spread. The business, the one he had paraded around town as the symbol of his hard work and dominance, folded. Clients who had once praised him cut ties overnight. Suppliers came knocking for unpaid bills, and when they realized there was no money, lawsuits followed. The man who had always strutted around with his chin high, who mocked me for being weak, was now the subject of whispers and pity. In a small town, reputation is everything, and his had shattered. Caleb tried to keep up appearances, but it wasn't long before cracks showed. Without Dad's financial support, he was exposed. The flashy clothes, the trips, the arrogance, all of it had been built on Dad's wallet. He called me again, this time not with smugness, but desperation. Elias, please, he said, his voice shaking. You don't understand. We're drowning here. And for the first time, I understood perfectly. This was the same brother who had mocked me from my old room, who had basked in being the golden child. Now he was realizing that the pedestal he had been placed on was crumbling beneath him. I didn't yell. I didn't gloat. I simply told him, you'll figure it out. The way I had to. And then I hung up. My mother, who had always been the quiet mediator, finally reached out too. Her message was different, less demanding, more sorrowful. I should have done more, she admitted. I should have stopped him. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Because no matter how much she claimed regret, her silence during all those years had been its own kind of betrayal. And while part of me still loved her, I couldn't carry her guilt too. As for Dad, his final message came on a Sunday morning. The same day, I moved into a new apartment. Bigger, brighter, paid for entirely by me. It wasn't long, just a single line. I was wrong. I stared at it for a long time, my chest tight, memories flooding back of every insult, every dismissal, every time he had told me I'd never be enough. And now here it was, an admission too late to matter. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. His silence after that message was louder than anything he could have said. Months passed, and I heard through the grapevine that he had sold the house. The same house he had thrown me out of. The same lawn where my belongings had been scattered like trash. He downsized into a small rental on the edge of town, a shadow of the man who once towered over everyone. People no longer respected him. They pitied him. And in many ways, that was worse for him than anything I could have done. I, on the other hand, kept rising. Promotions, opportunities, friendships rebuilt. My life was no longer defined by his approval or his rejection. I had carved out my own space in the world, one that no one could take away. One evening, after another long day at work, I drove past the old house. A for sale sign leaned crooked in the yard, the paint peeling from the shutters, the once manicured lawn overgrown. I pulled over for just a moment, staring at the place that had once been both my prison and my proving ground. And then, without a word, I drove away. Not in anger, not in sadness, but in peace. Because for the first time, I understood revenge wasn't about destroying him. It was about walking away whole while he crumbled under the weight of his own choices. And I had done just that. It took me nearly a year to save up for my son's dream bike. Not just any bike. This was the kind he'd clip out of magazines and tape to his bedroom wall. The kind he'd ramble about after school with stars in his eyes. The kind he'd spend hours watching YouTube reviews for, comparing gears and brakes like a kid studying for the bar exam. It had matte black paint, bright red trim, hydraulic disc brakes, and a frame so light it felt like holding a feather. I'm not exaggerating when I say he cried when he saw it. Real tears, the kind that make every hour of overtime, every packed lunch instead of takeout, every skipped coffee shop visit worth it. His name is Lucas. He's 9, and he's a good kid. A kind kid. The kind who says thank you before he even opens the box. The kind of kid who deserves good things. My name's Adrian. I'm 36. Single dad since Lucas was 3. His mom and I split on decent enough terms. She's in Oregon now, and we share custody across states, but Lucas lives with me most of the year. My side of the family is complicated. Let's just say they see me as the sensitive one, the one who never quite lived up to my older brother Kyle's standards of masculinity. Kyle's 39, football coach at our old high school, loud in every room he walks into. You know the type. Barbecue dad energy, except without the warm heart to match. He has twin boys, Jack and Tyler, both 7, and a daughter, Macy, who's 5. His wife, Dana, is sweet in that passive-aggressive bless-your-heart kind of way. And my mom? Well, she's the glue that holds all the dysfunction together. A retired kindergarten teacher with a permanent smile and a bottomless bag of excuses for her favorite child. It started with a comment. That's how things like this always begin, right? With something small enough that you almost let it go. We were all at my mom's house for her birthday, potluck style, backyard picnic, kids running wild in the grass. I had Lucas's bike locked in the back of my SUV. I wasn't planning to bring it out. Not yet. I wanted him to enjoy it at home without chaos around, without his cousins begging for a turn or Kyle making some crack about spoiling him. But Lucas, being Lucas, couldn't help but bring it up. He was beaming. Dad got me the Phantom 700, he told the twins, practically bouncing. It has Shimano gear sets and dual suspension forks. Kyle snorted like he'd just heard a joke. Shimano, huh? What? You win the lottery or something? I smiled, shrugged. Saved up for it. Been planning it for a while. Man, he said, shaking his head. You always did have a thing for wasting money. I laughed it off. I shouldn't have, but I did. Because you pick your battles in families like mine. You learn early that challenging Kyle just makes everything worse. And honestly, I was too happy watching Lucas glow to let Kyle ruin it. But then Tyler chimed in. Can we ride it? Lucas looked at me with that hopeful look kids get, the one that says I want to share, but also please don't let anything happen to it. I stepped in gently. Not today, bud. It's a new bike. Lucas hasn't even had his first ride yet. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. A few hours later, while I was helping Mom carry cake inside, I noticed Lucas wasn't in the backyard anymore. I asked Dana where he went, and she waved toward the front of the house. I think he's showing the boys that fancy bike. My stomach dropped. I bolted out the front door, and that's when I saw it. The bike was on the driveway, surrounded by all 3 of Kyle's kids. Tyler had a plastic baseball bat. Jack had one too. Macy was jumping up and down like it was a carnival game. Lucas stood frozen a few feet away, hands clenched into tiny fists, mouth trembling, eyes wide and glassy. And the sound of metal getting dented. Really dented. It's one of those noises you don't forget. Whack, whack, crack. I ran. Not walked. Not shouted. I ran toward them, my heart punching against my ribs like it was trying to escape my chest. What the stop? I shouted, yanking the bats from their hands like they were fire. What do you think you're doing? Lucas burst into tears. Jack looked at me and said, Tyler said it would bounce. Tyler smirked, not even sorry. It's just a bike. I wheeled around, scanning for Kyle. He was leaning against his truck, arms crossed, sipping from a red Solo cup like he was watching the evening news. You saw this? I asked, holding up the bat like Exhibit A. He shrugged. They're kids, Adrian. You can't freak out every time someone touches your precious toys. That wasn't a toy. That was a $700 bike I spent all year saving for. You bought a 9-year-old a $700 bike? He said, laughing like that was the funniest part. Well, that's your first mistake. I looked at my mom, who had come out to see what the shouting was about. She glanced at the bike, now lying on its side, the front wheel warped like a bad dream, and then back at me with a sigh. They didn't mean to, honey, she said. Boys will be boys. My jaw clenched so tight I thought I might crack a molar. Lucas told them not to touch it, I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. I told them not to touch it. You all heard me. Kyle walked closer, gave the bike a lazy once-over. You should have bought something cheaper, or at least taught the kid to keep it inside. Something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically. It was more like a wire twisting, slowly, until it couldn't take the pressure anymore. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I just looked down at my son, still crying softly, and whispered, "Let's go." Lucas sniffled. "But the bike." "I know, buddy," I said. "We're not done yet." I took his hand, unlocked the SUV, and drove off without another word. No goodbye? No thanks for the cake. I didn't even look in the rearview mirror. But 2 days later, I came back, and I didn't come empty-handed. The funny thing about betrayal is how quiet it is when it finally settles in. You'd think it would hit you like a slap or an explosion. But no. When I walked out of my mom's house that day with Lucas, watching his knuckles white around the handle of what was left of his dream bike, there wasn't an explosion. There was just silence. Silence in the car, silence in my gut, silence in that aching spot behind my eyes. I didn't even play the radio. We got home, and I parked the SUV in the driveway. Lucas didn't get out right away. He just stared at the floor of the car, his small hands still trembling. "Can we fix it?" he asked, voice cracking. I didn't have the heart to lie. "I'll see what I can do." I carried the bike inside like it was a broken limb. It wasn't just scratched, it was wrecked. The derailleur was bent in, the chain was twisted and half off the gear, the front wheel was completely warped. Even the seat was cracked. Those weren't accidents. That wasn't just playing rough. They'd smashed it. On purpose. Laughing. And Kyle just stood there, letting them. Over the next few days, I tried to get it repaired. Every shop I went to gave me the same look, a mix of pity and awkward discomfort, followed by the same verdict. "It's totaled." One guy even said, "This looks like it got hit by a car." I almost laughed. When I told Lucas, he didn't say anything. He just nodded, then went to his room and shut the door. That's when the anger started to fester. But I didn't say anything to Kyle. Or my mom. Not yet. Because I wanted to believe this was a one-time thing. A bad day. A mistake. Families are messy, right? We're supposed to forgive. That's what my mom always says. Then came the 4th of July. Every year, it's a big deal in our family. Backyard fireworks, hot dogs, music, the whole cliché. This year, it was at Kyle's house. I wasn't going to go. Honestly, I'd already made up my mind to cut back on how often I saw them. But then Lucas came to me the night before, holding a crudely wrapped present with blue star-patterned paper. "I want to give this to Grandpa," he said quietly. "My dad passed away 5 years ago." Lucas barely remembers him, but he still calls him Grandpa when he talks about the little things, like how he'd whistle when he worked in the garage, or how he always carried peppermints in his coat pocket. Lucas made a wooden key holder in art class with Grandpa's tools carved into the front. He wanted to leave it in Grandpa's old shed at Kyle's house, where Dad used to fix lawnmowers and old bikes before his health gave out. I caved. We went. It started fine. The food was good, the weather was warm, Lucas was playing catch with some of the other kids, and I tried to just exist without tension. But it didn't last. About an hour in, Dana approached me with that tight smile of hers and said, "Hey, so the boys are asking if Lucas brought his new bike. They want another go at it." I froze. I couldn't tell if it was a joke or a threat. I forced a laugh. "Well, he didn't. And after last time, I think it's best we just leave it." "Oh, sure," she said quickly, holding her hands up. "Of course. It's just, they're still talking about it, you know? They're boys." It was exciting. Yeah, exciting. Lucas came over around then, holding the wrapped gift. He looked nervous. "Can I put it in the shed now?" I walked with him. The shed was old and dusty, full of spider webs and tools rusted with time. But Lucas walked in like it was sacred ground. He placed the gift on a small shelf, right next to Grandpa's old coffee mug, still there after all these years, and whispered, "Happy 4th, Grandpa." I swallowed the lump in my throat. We stayed in the shed a little longer, just to breathe in the quiet. When we came back out, the twins were holding water balloons, one in each hand. Before I could say anything, Tyler launched one right at Lucas's chest. It hit him square and cold, soaking his shirt. The second followed a second later, splashing across his face. Lucas gasped, more from shock than pain. "Hey," I snapped, stepping between them. "They're just water balloons," Kyle called from the porch, beer in hand again. "You threw it right at his face?" I shot back. Jack shrugged. He looked hot. Lucas was shivering, his lips pressed into a tight line. I handed him my hoodie and led him inside to dry off. I found Dana in the kitchen. "Your boys soaked my son," I said flatly. "They're just playing," she said with a sigh. "Maybe he should learn to play back. He's not a punching bag." She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. I'll talk to them. She didn't. We left early. That night, Lucas didn't say much at all. Just curled up with a book and stayed in bed. I stood in the hallway and stared at the door, clenching and unclenching my fists, wondering how many times you can excuse cruelty as just boys being boys before it becomes something darker. 2 weeks later, the betrayal happened. Lucas had been working on something for weeks. He'd saved up his allowance, sold a few old toys online, and asked me to match what he earned so he could buy a Lego robotics set. Not a cheap one either. This was one of those high-end kits with coding and sensors and all that STEM magic. I was proud of him. He planned to build a robot arm and show it off at his school's science fair. He finally got it delivered on a Friday afternoon. I let him open it in the living room, and he was glowing, laughing, inspecting every piece like it was treasure. He didn't even finish dinner that night. Just kept tinkering with the set, carefully organizing everything by color and function. He even labeled the compartments in the storage box. The next day, I had to run a quick errand, so I left Lucas home with my mom, who had come over to visit and insisted she'd keep him company. I was gone maybe 2 hours. When I got back, the house was too quiet. Lucas, I called. Silence. Then I saw him. In his room. Sitting on the floor. The robot kit was spilled around him like wreckage from a plane crash. Wires tangled, pieces snapped, sensors ripped from their sockets. His hands were in his lap, palms open. Just staring. What happened? I asked, heart climbing into my throat. He looked up slowly. His voice was small. They took it. I blinked. Who? Tyler and Jack, he whispered. Grandma let them in. I stormed into the living room. Mom. She looked up from the couch like I'd startled her awake. What's the matter? You let Kyle's boys in here. Well, yes. They were in the neighborhood. Kyle said they could stop by. I stared at her, stunned. Without me here? Without asking. She waved her hand dismissively. They're family. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. They destroyed his robotics kit. She frowned. It's just some toys. I'm sure Lucas can build it again. No, he can't. Half the parts are snapped in half. And even if he could, he spent weeks saving up for it. Do you know how hard he worked? Don't talk to me like I'm some stranger, Adrian, she said sharply. They're children. You should stop treating them like criminals. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her and make her understand. But I didn't. Instead, I turned and walked back to Lucas's room. He looked up at me like he wanted me to fix it, like dads are supposed to. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I couldn't fix it this time. Not with glue. Not with money. Not with any speech or lesson or punishment. But I could do something else. And that's when the plan started to take shape. Slow. Careful. Calculated. I didn't tell Lucas. Not yet. He needed time to heal. But I made phone calls. I dug through old records. I checked dates. I reviewed legal documents that had gathered dust for years. And 2 weeks later, I asked Kyle and my mom to meet me at the house. I said I wanted to clear the air. They came, thinking I was going to apologize. They had no idea what was coming. There's a specific kind of silence that lives in a house after a child's heart breaks. It isn't loud or even obvious, but it lingers. In the way footsteps echo across rooms that used to be full of laughter. In how the TV stays off even during dinner. In how the air feels heavy, like everyone's holding their breath, afraid to say the wrong thing. That was our house for weeks after the robotics kit. Lucas didn't cry much. He didn't yell. He just got quieter. He still went to school, still brushed his teeth and made his bed, still said good night before bed. But his light dimmed. The boy who used to hum while sorting his Legos now walked past them without looking. The kid who once gave me 30-minute lectures on which gear ratios were best for mountain bikes now stared at his cereal like it offended him. And me? I was stuck in this awful place between rage and helplessness. Every time I saw Lucas's slumped shoulders, I felt like a failure. Not because I didn't buy him something new, but because I let them in. I let my mom dismiss his pain again. I let Kyle's boys take one more thing from him. And worst of all, I hadn't protected him from the people who were supposed to love him. The week after the robotics kit incident, I didn't hear from my mom. Not a call. Not a text. She didn't ask how Lucas was. She didn't offer to replace anything. She didn't even say sorry. Kyle, of course, doubled down. You've always been soft, he said on the phone when I confronted him. Maybe if you didn't raise Lucas like he was made of glass, he wouldn't fall apart every time a toy breaks. That was the last straw. I hung up without a word. For the first time in my adult life, I started to cut them off. Not just in theory, not just emotionally. Actually, I didn't show up to Sunday dinners. I ignored group messages. I didn't return calls. I even blocked Kyle for a while, just so I could breathe. Lucas and I started spending weekends differently. No more family cookouts. No more visits to grandma's. Instead, we went to the science center, or built paper rockets in the backyard, or played card games at the coffee table with popcorn and juice boxes. And slowly, very slowly, that silence in the house started to loosen its grip. Then, one morning, I saw Lucas sitting at the dining table with a small notebook. He was sketching something. I didn't say anything at first. I didn't want to break the spell. But after a few minutes, I asked, "What are you working on?" He held it up shyly. A design for a robotic claw. In pencil. With labels and arrows. "I want to try again," he said. "But this time I want to build something strong. Something they can't break." I swear to you, I almost cried right there. That day, we started over. I told him I couldn't replace the whole kit, but I could help him piece something together from parts. We started scouring eBay, used tech forums, even a few garage sales. Lucas was cautious. He didn't want me spending too much. But we made it a project. Together. Every Saturday, we'd add a piece or two. A servo here. A microcontroller there. Bit by bit, he rebuilt something new. And it wasn't just a machine this time. He was rebuilding himself. At night, after he went to bed, I'd research robotics online. Not just for him, for me too. I didn't want to just be the guy holding the flashlight anymore. I wanted to understand what made him light up. I learned about Arduino boards, coding platforms, wiring patterns, even basic Python. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to meet him where he was. And you know what happened? People noticed. His science teacher sent home a note. "Lucas is showing incredible focus. He's way ahead of the curriculum." His principal pulled me aside one morning and said, "We'd like to recommend Lucas for a local robotics mentorship program. He's got real talent." He wasn't just bouncing back, he was thriving. Meanwhile, my mom's silence cracked one day when I got a letter in the mail. Yes, a letter. I opened it in the kitchen while Lucas was working on a code for a proximity sensor. The letter was short, just a few lines written in her soft cursive. "Adrian, I'm sorry if I hurt you. I didn't mean for things to get so bad. The family isn't the same without you. Please come by next week. Love, Mom." There was no mention of Lucas. No mention of what happened. Just vague sadness. Like a note someone leaves in a guest book. I didn't respond. But I didn't throw it away either. A week later, I got a text from Dana. Just one sentence. "Are you coming to Kyle's birthday?" I stared at it for a long time. Here's the thing about family, especially toxic family. They expect you to come back. They expect your silence to be temporary. That's part of the dance. They hurt you. You go quiet. They let time smooth over the details. And then, boom, you're at the next cookout like nothing happened. Rinse and repeat. But I wasn't playing that game anymore. Still, I needed something. Closure? Maybe. A confrontation? Probably. Or maybe I just needed them to see. So I sent a message. "I'll come. I want to talk." The birthday was at Kyle's house. Of course it was. Dana probably decorated the entire place with football-themed balloons and beer-branded banners. I wasn't planning to stay long. I told Lucas he didn't have to come, and he didn't hesitate. He wanted to keep working on the robot. I think he sensed I needed to do this alone. I arrived around 5. The usual crowd was there. My aunt with her baked ziti, my cousin Derek glued to his phone, Kyle in his usual king of the backyard stance near the grill. When he saw me, his eyebrows shot up. "Well, look who decided to show up," he said, arms wide like he was doing me a favor. I gave him a tight nod. "I just came to talk." Mom spotted me and rushed over with a glass of lemonade. She looked thinner than I remembered, but maybe that was just the guilt finally weighing her down. "Adrian, I'm so glad you're here," she said, touching my arm. I didn't return the hug. "Can we sit?" We went inside, away from the party noise. I didn't waste time. "I'm not here to make peace," I said, my voice steady. "I'm here to explain something." Kyle snorted. "This should be good." I turned to my mom. "You let them destroy something Lucas worked his heart out for. Twice. And both times, you defended them. You called him dramatic. You said boys will be boys. But what you really meant was Kyle's boys will be boys." She opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. "I get it. Kyle's always been the golden child. You've made excuses for him since we were kids. But this, what happened to Lucas, This wasn't sibling rivalry. This was cruelty. Repeated cruelty. And you stood there and let it happen. Mom looked down at her lap. Kyle rolled his eyes. Adrian, come on. You're acting like my kids are criminals. They're just. No, I said, turning to him. They're not criminals. Yet. But if they keep learning that they can smash, insult, and take whatever they want without consequences, guess what? They'll grow into men just like you. That shut him up. I stood. I'm done trying to be the peacemaker. I'm done letting my son think this is what family is supposed to feel like. From now on, Lucas comes first. And if that means cutting ties, then so be it. My mom's eyes welled up. But still, no apology. Not really. Just pain. And regret. I walked to the door, then paused. Oh, and one more thing. I'm filing a police report for the damage to Lucas's robotics kit. It was over $300 worth of equipment. Since it happened while you were supervising, Mom, you'll be listed on the statement. Her mouth fell open. Kyle laughed. You're kidding. I looked at him. I'm really not. Then I left. I didn't look back. That was the moment everything changed. But the fallout? That came later. And trust me, it was glorious. Sometimes when you finally stop playing the game, you realize just how rigged the board always was. After that final conversation at Kyle's house, things didn't explode right away. No shouting matches. No Facebook status wars. No angry voicemails. Just silence. A different kind this time. One that felt more like a standoff than a wound. Kyle didn't call. My mom didn't write. And I didn't care. For once, I wasn't waiting around for them to come to their senses. I was too busy building something better. Lucas and I had found our rhythm again. Weekends became creative labs. Evenings were filled with quiet humming of tiny motors and the sound of keys tapping as he learned to code basic movement loops. The claw he designed was now a full arm. It could wave, lift objects, even fist bump, which he found hilarious. He called it Project Atlas. I told him it sounded like something a superhero would invent. And in a way it was. Not because it could save the world, but because it had saved him. And me? I'd quietly started something else in the background. Let me explain. After I filed that police report about the robotics kit, I didn't expect much. Not really. I knew it wouldn't go far. Kyle's boys were underage. My mom didn't exactly have a criminal record, and I wasn't pushing for charges. But I wanted it documented. Because that's the thing people forget. When your family gaslights you, a paper trail is power. The responding officer, Officer Garcia, was surprisingly kind. He took the report seriously, asked the right questions, even looked a little disgusted when I showed him the photos of the destroyed pieces. This wasn't an accident, he said, flipping through the photos. They pried this part open. That's not just roughhousing. I nodded. They've done this before. With his bike. He tilted his head. Same kids. Same kids. Same excuses. He closed the folder. I'll file this. Might not go anywhere now. But if it happens again, you'll have a record. That helps. I thanked him and left. But something about that conversation stuck with me. Might not go anywhere now. What if I didn't wait for it to happen again? What if instead of hoping karma showed up someday, I invited it over? That's when the ideas started to take shape. See, I'm not the revenge type. Not in the dramatic, movie-style way. I'm not going to slash Kyle's tires or dump paint on his porch. That's kid stuff. That's temporary. I wanted something quieter. Deeper. I wanted him to feel what it was like to lose something precious. Not just physically, but socially. Reputationally. Emotionally. And I had the perfect starting point. His job. Kyle's a high school football coach. Has been for almost 12 years. That school? It's his kingdom. He walks those hallways like he owns them. His players worship him. The parents praise him. And the school board? They love his record. 2 state championships, 3 regional titles, and 1 incident in 2017 that got buried because boys will be boys. That incident? I never forgot it. Because I was the one who helped him bury it. A few years back, one of Kyle's star players got into a fight at a party. Broke a kid's nose. The cops got involved. But Kyle convinced the victim's parents not to press charges. And I, stupidly, helped draft the apology letter that smoothed it over. Back then, I thought I was helping him protect a kid's future. Now I see it for what it was, a pattern. Kyle doesn't believe in consequences. He believes in cover-ups. So I started digging. Not just into that old incident, but everything. I requested public records from the school board. I went through local news archives. I talked, quietly, with a couple of teachers I still knew from when Lucas did summer enrichment programs. And what I found? was gold. Turns out, Kyle's been playing fast and loose with ethics for years. Missing equipment funds. Booster club donations that don't match up with event records. Volunteer, hours logged under his kids' names for extra credit. Oh, and the real kicker? He used the school's district discount to purchase private sports equipment for his own sons. Stuff that never showed up in any team inventory lists. I compiled everything. Dates, documents, screenshots. I created a Google Drive folder with organized tabs. Labeled it Kyle Audit. But I wasn't done. Because if there's one thing toxic families hate more than being caught, it's being exposed by one of their own. So I turned to someone who hates Kyle just as much as I do. My cousin Jeremy. Jeremy's kind of the black sheep. Tech guy, moved out of state a while back, super into data privacy and whistleblower laws. Kyle always mocked him growing up, called him Silicon Weirdo and the Password Prince. But Jeremy? He never forgot that. We hadn't talked in a while, but when I sent him a message with just 4 words, "I need your help," he responded in less than 5 minutes. A week later, we were on Zoom. I showed him everything. He laughed. Actually laughed when I told him Kyle had been misusing school funds. "This is so illegal," he said, eyes wide. "Like, state auditor illegal." "That's what I was hoping," I said. Jeremy didn't just help. He went all in. He set up anonymous drop boxes for me to submit documents. He walked me through how to request financial records from the Booster Club without raising flags. He even scrubbed metadata from my files so nothing could be traced back directly. Then came the final piece, timing. I didn't want to drop the hammer immediately. I wanted to watch it build, like a storm on the horizon. Kyle's birthday had been the fracture. Now I needed the pressure to mount. And lucky for me, fate delivered. Our old high school, the one Kyle works at, was gearing up for a major expansion. The district had just approved a bond to renovate the gym and athletic fields. Big money, big oversight. And Kyle? He was trying to get himself promoted to athletic director so he could oversee the whole budget. That's when I knew. This was it. If I dropped the right information at the right time, not only would he lose the promotion, he might lose his job. Maybe more. But I wasn't just doing this for revenge. Not anymore. I was doing it because Lucas deserved better family than this. Because how many kids had Kyle already hurt with his unchecked ego? How many more would he silence or dismiss, just like he did to my son? It was time to pull the trigger. But first, I made one final visit. To my mom. She looked surprised when I knocked. Surprised and weirdly hopeful. "I thought you weren't speaking to me," she said. "I wasn't. I'm not here for tea." She stepped aside. "Okay." I walked in, looked around the living room. The same photos on the wall. Same old blanket on the couch. But it all felt smaller now. Like I'd finally outgrown it. "I'm going to tell you something," I said. "And you're not going to like it." She crossed her arms. "Adrian, if this is about..." "I've been documenting what Kyle's been doing," I cut in. "At work. With the school's money. With his team. I have proof." She paled. "You can't. He's your brother." "No," I said. "He's your favorite." "That's not the same thing." She sank into a chair. "Adrian, think about the family. Think about the consequences." I leaned forward. "Lucas is the family I'm thinking about. And I'm done teaching him that silence is love. Or that loyalty means letting people hurt you over and over again." She didn't say anything. She just looked at me, stunned. I got up. "Oh," I added, just before leaving, "you might want to talk to a lawyer. If any of those misused funds trace back to events you signed off on for the PDA, the district might come knocking." The color drained from her face. I walked out. That was 3 days ago. Tomorrow, everything goes live. The files, the reports, the whistleblower emails, the letter to the superintendent, signed anonymously, but crafted so carefully, so specifically, that no one will have to wonder who pulled the thread. Only how far it will unravel. Kyle's about to find out what it feels like when your world starts cracking under your feet. And me? I'm just getting started. I sent the email at 7:52 a.m. on a Wednesday. Nothing flashy. No dramatic countdown. Just a clean message, sent through a burner address routed through 3 encrypted relays, dropped quietly into the inboxes of the school superintendent, the local board of education, the Booster Club treasurer, and, for good measure, a reporter I'd once met at a town hall meeting who had a nose for local corruption and an axe to grind. Subject line, urgent, financial irregularities in athletic department, documentation attached. The attachments? 32 files, each named and organized. A full audit trail, screenshots of Kyle's equipment orders with mismatched delivery records, PDA sign-off sheets signed by my mother for events that never occurred, bank statements, and a detailed timeline of booster fund misappropriation. I even included video stills from a school board live stream where Kyle bragged about cutting costs while charging personal items to the school. By 10:04 a.m., my phone buzzed. Not from the recipients. I'd blocked responses to the burner account. It was Jeremy. Bro, it's happening. Your file is being forwarded around the entire board. Just saw it on the back end. It's spreading like wildfire. By 11:22 a.m., I got a text from my cousin Derek. Dude, what did you do? Kyle just got pulled out of a staff meeting. Whole thing was live on the school's internal Zoom. Principal looked pissed. And by 3:37 p.m., the local news had it. The headline: Breaking, allegations surface of financial misconduct in district athletic department. I watched it unfold in real time. The article didn't name Kyle yet, but it didn't have to. Longtime head coach under investigation. Anonymous whistleblower provides evidence of equipment fraud. Audit committee convened. It was him. Kyle tried to get ahead of it. I know because Dana posted a long-winded Facebook status that same night about jealous people with vendettas and how Kyle poured his soul into those kids and deserved better than this witch hunt. The comments started off supportive, but then someone replied with a screenshot of the news article. Then another posted a link to a public court database. Apparently, Kyle had been sued in small claims court back in 2020 by a former assistant coach for unpaid dues and unauthorized charges. Someone else, probably a parent from the team, posted photos of Kyle's twins wearing gear identical to the missing school equipment inventory. The tide turned fast. By the next morning, the school district released an official statement. Pending the outcome of the invesagation, Coach K, last name withheld here, has been placed on administrative leave. We take financial misconduct seriously and are working with authorities to review all claims. That wasn't just a slap on the wrist. That was the beginning of the end. You know what people forget? How fast reputations unravel once they're exposed to daylight. The school board isn't loyal, they're strategic. Kyle wasn't their golden boy anymore. He was a liability. Within a week, the athletic director position was quietly pulled from consideration. The renovation project was placed under internal review, and Kyle's coaching duties were reassigned temporarily to his assistant coach. The truth? It was over. He just didn't know how much yet. The fallout wasn't just professional. At home, things crumbled faster than I expected. Dana tried to keep up appearances for a while, posting filtered family photos, pretending everything was fine. But the cracks showed. Kyle was angry, bitter, lashing out at everyone. Lucas heard from one of his friends at school that Kyle's twins had started getting picked on. Nicknames like Coach Crook and Tyler the Thief had started making rounds. I didn't celebrate that part. I didn't want the kids hurt. But it wasn't my job to shield them from the consequences their parents refused to teach them. That had always been the problem. And my mom, that's where it stung the most. About a week after the story broke, she showed up at my door unannounced. She looked older. Not in the tired way, in the defeated way. Shoulders hunched, skin pale, eyes dull like a cloudy sky. She held a box in her arms. I opened the door. Said nothing. She stepped inside and placed the box on the table. I came to return these, she said quietly. They were in the shed. I kept meaning to give them back to Lucas. I opened the box. Inside were pieces of the original destroyed robotics kit. Bits of plastic, scorched wires, a few instruction booklets. It looked like the wreckage of a forgotten dream. I closed the lid. She sat down across from me. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten. I didn't answer. She tried again. I always thought if I kept the peace, everything would stay okay. I looked at her. It didn't. She nodded. Her eyes brimmed, but she didn't let the tears fall. I know I failed him. And I failed you. Still, I said nothing. I let the silence say it for me. After a long pause, she stood to leave. At the door, she hesitated. You did what I couldn't. You protected your son. I didn't hug her. I didn't invite her to dinner. But I didn't slam the door, either. That was our version of progress. Lucas never asked what happened to Kyle. He didn't need to. He was too busy thriving. That same week, he presented his finished robotic arm at the regional science fair. The one I'd helped him build piece by piece from scraps and salvage parts. It worked like a charm. The judges were impressed not just by the engineering, but the resilience of the story behind it. Lucas didn't win first place. He won a mentorship. A local engineer, one of the judges, offered to take him on as a mentee in a junior robotics program. Lucas beamed all the way home. When I asked how he felt, he just said, "I guess Project Atlas worked after all." Yeah, it really did. The official audit report came out 2 months later. The findings were damning. Misuse of funds, falsified records, unreported gifts. Kyle was fired. Not just suspended. Fired. Without severance. His teaching license was flagged. The state opened a secondary investigation into possible fraud charges. I don't know where he's working now. Probably not in a school. Dana filed for separation shortly after. The house went up for sale not long after that. The last time I saw Kyle was at the grocery store. He was pushing a cart, looking smaller than I remembered, like all that arrogance had finally deflated. He saw me. We locked eyes for a moment. He didn't say a word. Neither did I, but he looked away first. A few weeks ago, Lucas and I took a bike ride. A long one. He was on his bike, a new one, bought with part of my bonus from a freelance project I took on after cutting ties with the family. It wasn't flashy, but it was his. He rode in front of me, the wind in his hair, laughter echoing down the trail. At one point, he stopped and looked back at me. "Race you to the top." I grinned. "You're on." We pedaled hard, side by side, the sun dipping low behind us. And for a moment, just a fleeting second, I realized something. The revenge hadn't just been about making them pay. It was about reclaiming peace. Reclaiming us. At the top of the hill, Lucas raised his arms in triumph. I caught up, breathless but smiling. He looked at me, grinning. "Did we win?" I looked out at the sunset. "Yeah, buddy," I said. "We did. My name's Adam. I'm 28, the youngest of 3 siblings, and apparently the designated family disappointment. Not my words, my mother's, in fact. You've always been different," she'd say, like she was trying to be kind but couldn't quite resist twisting the knife. Different, in our house, was code for, "You're not like us." And by us, she meant my older sister Meredith and my brother Eric, the golden girl and the dependable one. Meredith was everything I wasn't: polished, extroverted, ambitious in a socially acceptable way. She made partner at her law firm last year and immediately turned into a wedding Pinterest board in heels. Eric was quieter, but he was mom's rock. He got a stable job in finance, married a nice girl, and gave my parents their first grandchild before 30. Me? I went to art school. I freelance as a graphic designer. I rent a modest apartment above a coffee shop, drive a car I paid off myself, and live a life I actually like. But none of that matters to my family because I didn't do it their way. The engagement dinner for Meredith was held at this upscale restaurant with marble floors, gold-trimmed menus, and waiters who didn't write anything down but somehow never forgot your order. It was supposed to be intimate, just close family and a few friends. But knowing Meredith, it was more of a dress rehearsal for the main event. Everything had to be Instagram perfect. The lighting, the seating chart, even the color of the drinks. I got an invite the same day the florist confirmed. That's not sarcasm. The email literally said, "Hey, Adam, just a heads up. We're having the engagement dinner next Saturday. It's at Verde. 7 p.m. Dress smart." That was it. "No, we'd love to see you." "No, can you make it?" Just a directive. Like they were checking off a list. Still, I showed up. I ironed a button down, cleaned my boots, and even got a fresh haircut. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I just didn't want to give them more ammunition. I parked in the lot across the street, walked in, and gave the host my name. He raised an eyebrow, then led me through a long corridor into a private dining room at the back. The lights were warm, the table was pristine, and everyone was already seated. Except for one glaring detail, the place cards. They were little folded cards with gold calligraphy, probably printed, not handwritten. Meredith said bride-to-be. Her fiancé, Ryan, said future groom. My mom and dad were mother of the bride and proud father. Even Eric had best brother. There was one card left. Mine. And when I saw it, my stomach dropped. The failure. At first, I thought it was a sick joke. A placeholder someone forgot to swap out. I stood there staring, not saying a word. And then I heard it: Snickers. Meredith's friend Tara covered her mouth with her wine glass. Ryan let out a breathy laugh and looked at Meredith like he was impressed. My mom smiled. Not sheepishly, proudly. "Oh, come on, Adam," she said. "It's just a little joke. Don't be so sensitive." Eric didn't laugh. He just looked away, suddenly very interested in his water glass. I sat down slowly, my chest tight. Every word out of their mouths after that felt like background noise, the kind of static you hear on a TV that's lost signal. They toasted the engagement, talked about caterers and colors and venues and honeymoons. They passed around shrimp cocktails and laughed at inside jokes. No one mentioned me again, not by name. Just someone's a little quiet tonight, or guess we touched a nerve. I said nothing. Not at first. But as the wine flowed and their laughter got louder, something inside me cracked, not in an explosive way. More like a steady, clean break. I looked at them, my family, and felt like I was seeing them clearly for the first time. The polished surface, the fake affection, the backhanded compliments disguised as banter. I realized I wasn't upset because they crossed a line. I was upset because I kept letting them. When Meredith raised her glass for the third time and said, "Here's to family, who puts up with you even when you mess up your whole life trying to be an artist," I stood up. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just picked up my glass, looked at each one of them, really looked, and said, "To family. The kind you learn to live without." The room fell silent. Even the waiter paused mid-step. I set my glass down gently and walked out. No one followed me. Not at first. As I walked across the parking lot, I pulled out my keys. Ryan's car, technically leased under my name, because his credit wasn't good enough, was parked right next to mine. I'd been the cool future brother-in-law who helped them out a few months ago. But there's a reason I kept the spare key. And there's a reason I never took my name off the registration. I unlocked it, got in, and drove off without hesitation. On the way home, I called the venue they were planning to tour the following weekend. The deposit? Paid on my card. So were the reservations for their mini engagement trip to Napa and the custom cake tasting scheduled for Tuesday. One by one, I canceled every single one. Politely, of course. I didn't yell. I just explained there had been a change of plans. By the time I got home, my phone had begun buzzing. Meredith, Ryan, Mom, Eric, over and over. I didn't answer. Because for the first time in years, I finally felt in control. And then the messages started pouring in. At first, it was just a trickle. A missed call from Meredith. A text from Mom that read, "What are you doing? Don't be ridiculous." Ryan left a voicemail with that smug undertone he always used when he thought he was being reasonable. "Hey, Adam, okay, so you made your point. Can we just talk? No need to be dramatic, man." But I didn't respond. By the time I sat down on my couch, the air thick with that strange mix of adrenaline and calm, my phone was buzzing like a dying insect. 31 missed calls. 12 voicemails. Meredith's messages started changing tone, first confused, then angry, then panicked. "Adam, seriously? Where's the car? You are not doing this. You wouldn't. Adam, nap is in 3 days. Call me back. Now." Mom chimed in again with, "If you're upset, you should have said something. This is cruel and immature. You're ruining a very special time." That last part made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was so them. I was ruining their special moment. Never mind the fact that they sat around a table and laughed while calling me a failure in cursive. I opened the group chat. Yes, we had a family group chat, and saw Eric had finally said something. "Okay, I don't know what's going on, but can someone explain why the reservations for Napa just got canceled?" No one replied. So I sent a single message to the group. Check whose name's on the receipts. And maybe next time, use something other than slurs disguised as humor. Enjoy figuring it out. Then I left the group chat entirely. The next morning, I got a call from the restaurant. The car had been towed from my name. I told the leasing company it was no longer in safe possession, and they were all too happy to cooperate. Funny how fast people respond when they're dealing with assets. By noon, Ryan had left a blistering series of texts. "You are insane. You will pay for this. Good luck ever being welcome at a family event again." Welcome? I wasn't sure I ever had been. And that thought haunted me more than I expected. Because the truth is, I had always wanted to be included. Even when I told myself I didn't care. Even when I rolled my eyes and stayed silent, deep down, there was always this pathetic little hope that one day they'd see me, really see me, as someone worthy of more than polite tolerance and jokes at my expense. But I realized something else that morning, sipping the cold coffee I'd forgotten to finish the night before. They didn't get to define me anymore. Meredith's world revolved around appearances. Ryan cared about control. My parents clung to the illusion that success came in one shape, one path, and I'd strayed from it. I had spent years internalizing that narrative. That because I didn't earn six figures or wear a suit or own a house in the suburbs, I was less than a backup character in their perfect family sitcom. But now, I was the one with the remote. That night, Eric showed up at my place. I heard the knock, checked the peephole, and hesitated. He was alone. No mom. No Meredith. No smug fiancé lurking in the shadows. Just my brother, looking tired and carrying two coffees. I opened the door without a word. "Hey," he said, quietly. I didn't laugh. "I know." He handed me one of the cups. I told him it was too far, even before you got there. "But you didn't stop it," I said. Not accusing, just a fact. He looked down. "Yeah, I didn't. I should have. I'm sorry." We sat on the balcony, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. For a long time, neither of us said anything. Then Eric cleared his throat. "You know, Dad said something last year. About you. We were at Thanksgiving, and he thought you couldn't hear. He said, Adam's not the kind of son you brag about at the office, but he's probably the only one who'd actually show up if you needed help moving a body." He chuckled. I think he meant it as a compliment. I didn't know what to do with that, so I just shook my head and took a sip. Eric stayed for another 20 minutes before leaving. He didn't press me to forgive anyone. Didn't try to explain it all away. He just said, "Call me if you ever want to talk." Or not. Either way, I get it. The next few days were oddly peaceful. The silence was louder than the noise used to be, but in a good way. Like taking off headphones after hours of static. I deleted the voicemails. Blocked Ryan. Muted Mom and Meredith. I didn't do it out of anger, but out of necessity. Out of self-preservation. But I knew something else was coming. Because I still hadn't heard the worst of it. And when the wedding planner called, completely confused, because half the vendors had backed out, I knew the next storm was about to hit. And I had a front row seat. The call from the wedding planner came 2 days later. I almost didn't answer. I didn't recognize the number, and I'd gotten in the habit of letting unknown calls go to voicemail. But something told me to pick up this one. "Hi, is this Adam Weston?" "Yes." "This is Vanessa Colburn, Meredith's wedding coordinator." I'm sorry to bother you, but there's been some confusion I was hoping you could help clear up." I didn't say anything at first. Just waited. "Well," she continued, her tone now carefully professional, "several vendors have informed us that reservations and contracts under your name were canceled, including the Napa trip, the cake tasting, and the transportation service for the bridal party. Meredith insisted everything was covered and that you were just the guarantor for the payments. But the more we look into it, your name is on nearly every primary account." "That's correct," I said simply. There was a pause. I could hear her flipping through paperwork in the background. "So you did cancel them?" "Yes." Another pause. This one longer. "I see," she said finally. "I suppose I don't need to ask why." "No," I said. "You don't." She exhaled. "Well, thank you for confirming. I appreciate the clarity. Though I expect I'll be hearing from Meredith shortly." "I'm sure you will." I hung up. And not 5 minutes later, the storm hit. Meredith called. Not just once. Over and over. I didn't pick up. She sent voice messages that started panicked and quickly morphed into rage. She accused me of sabotage, of jealousy, of ruining the most important day of her life. There were screenshots of unpaid deposits, cancellation notices, and then finally pictures of the place cards from the dinner. One in particular. The failure. With a caption, "You're overreacting." It was supposed to be funny. Get over yourself. It took everything in me not to respond. Not because I was tempted to argue, but because I realized I had nothing left to say. That place card summed it all up. Not just the name, but the laugh. The approval from everyone around the table. The shrug from Mom. The silence from Eric. I deleted the message. The next day, I went to the leasing office and formally ended the car agreement. Since I was still the primary signer, the dealership repossessed it with no legal issues. Apparently, Ryan had already gotten a warning notice because he'd been dodging calls for a week. I left the dealership, walked to my car, and sat there for a while, staring out the windshield. It was strange. There was no satisfaction. No gotcha moment. Just a calm, sobering clarity. I didn't want revenge. I wanted distance. I wanted peace. But Meredith wasn't going to let it in that easily. Later that week, I got a call from my aunt, Dad's sister. She's the closest thing I have to a sane family member. She never picked sides, never made passive-aggressive comments. Just existed quietly on the sidelines, offering polite support and sending thoughtful Christmas cards. "Adam," she said, I just got off the phone with your mom. Here it comes, I thought. She says you've gone off the deep end, that you're trying to punish Meredith, that you've embarrassed the whole family. I didn't say anything, just waited. But I know your mother, she added. And I know Meredith. And I also know that if someone like you, quiet, respectful, always putting up with more than you should, finally loses it, there's a reason. That caught me off guard. My throat tightened a little. She asked if I tried to talk some sense into you. Said maybe you'd listen to me. Are you here to do that? No, she said softly. I'm here to tell you I see you. And I'm proud of you. That was the first time anyone in my family had said that to me. And it shattered something I didn't know I'd been holding together with tape and false smiles. She told me she was sorry I'd had to deal with so much for so long. That sometimes, walking away is the brave thing. That maybe one day they'd understand, but that in the meantime, I should take care of myself and not feel guilty, because I'd done nothing wrong. After we hung up, I sat on the couch and looked around my apartment. It was small, messy in places, nothing fancy, but it was mine, every corner of it. I didn't owe it to anyone. I didn't earn it by playing some role to make other people comfortable. And for the first time in years, I realized I liked my life, even if no one in my family could see the value in it. That weekend, the wedding invitations went out. And that's when things got even messier. Because I wasn't just left off the invite list, they made sure everyone knew why. When the wedding invitations started circulating, I didn't expect to see one, and I didn't want one either. But I wasn't prepared for what actually showed up, because they did send me something. Not an invitation. A letter. Handwritten. On thick, cream-colored stationery with a golden MNR embossed at the top, like a royal decree. No envelope. Just folded and dropped unceremoniously into my mailbox, as if they couldn't even be bothered to seal it properly. It was from my mother. Adam, I hope by the time you read this, you've calmed down and realized how much pain you've caused. Meredith is devastated. Ryan's parents have pulled some of their contributions, and several vendors won't return our calls because of your little tantrum. I tried defending you. I really did. But I can only make so many excuses before people start wondering what's wrong with you. I'm asking you, one last time, to apologize. To make things right. Come to the wedding. Be gracious. Be a man. Prove to everyone that you're not as selfish and petty as you've made yourself out to be. It's not too late, unless you make it that way. This is your family, Adam. Don't throw it away over a joke. Mom. No apology. No reflection. Just that same twisting of the knife, wrapped in guilt and entitlement. I read it once, then again, slower the second time. Then I folded it neatly, slid it into a folder with my lease documents and car papers, my own silent archive of boundaries finally drawn, and poured myself a drink. That was the last straw. Not the insult. Not the letter. But the expectation that I'd show up, smile, and perform the role they had written for me one last time. I didn't respond to the letter. Instead, I made plans. I knew the wedding venue. A vineyard estate 2 hours out, the kind of place you book for the scenery, not the people. I didn't want to crash it, didn't want a scene. I just wanted closure on my terms. The night before the wedding, I sent one message. Not to the group chat. Just to Meredith, in just one sentence. You're right. I won't be attending. She didn't reply, but I knew she read it. And the next morning, while they were busy with hair and makeup and morning mimosas, I was on the phone, this time with a lawyer. You see, what my family forgot, what they never bothered to ask about, was how all those wedding reservations had been paid in the first place. It wasn't just favors or kindness. It wasn't me helping out. It was a loan. A documented, signed agreement between Meredith and me, drawn up by an attorney friend of mine back when she first asked for help funding her dream wedding. Back when she still wore a fake sweet voice and called me her artsy little brother. The contract was simple. I'd front the initial cost for the car lease, vendor deposits, and event bookings, and she'd reimburse me within 90 days of the wedding. Failure to do so would trigger a clause requiring immediate repayment, with interest, plus reimbursement for damages, i.e., any losses I incurred from being on the hook with my name and credit. She signed it. She laughed as she signed it. You're so dramatic, Adam. Like I'd ever mess you over. And now she had. The lawyer filed the demand letter that morning. Certified mail. A copy to her. A copy to Ryan. A copy to my parents, since they'd been involved in some of the financial arrangements. I didn't expect them to pay up. I expected them to react. And boy, did they. That afternoon, while I was at my apartment sketching out a client design for a new mural project, my phone exploded again. This time, It was Dad. What is this legal stuff, Adam? Are you seriously suing your sister on her wedding day? I didn't respond. He followed it with another call, then another, then a voicemail so long it got cut off. You ungrateful little. You think this is how you make a point? You think this makes you look like a man? No wonder no one takes you seriously. You always had a chip on your shoulder. I stopped listening, because for once, I didn't care. And I realized something even deeper. I had never been part of this family, not really. Not in the way they wanted. I wasn't the golden child. I wasn't the success story. I was the utility, the background player, the safety net, the ATM, the extra seat at the table to fill the photo. And now that I was gone, really gone, they were scrambling. Not because they missed me, but because they lost their free labor. I spent the day doing what I actually loved. Working, drawing, listening to music I liked, eating food I made myself in silence, without criticism or fake smiles. That night, while they danced and posed for filtered photos under fairy lights, I sat on my fire escape with a glass of bourbon and watched the city glow. 2 weeks later, the real fallout began. Meredith and Ryan ignored the demand letter, pretended it didn't exist. So the lawyer filed the next step, a formal civil suit. When they were served, Mom called again. Not to yell this time, but to beg. Adam, please, don't do this. It's embarrassing. People are talking. This will ruin her reputation. I took a breath, steady and calm. Did you think about my reputation when you laughed at that place card? She was quiet. Did you think about my life when you handed me a bill and called it a favor? Still silent. I'm not doing this out of spite, Mom. I'm doing this because I let all of you walk over me for years. And I finally stood up. Click. The case dragged for months. Meredith tried to play victim. Ryan made threats. Their attorney tried to settle quietly. But my lawyer was firm. We had every receipt, every contract, every message. And eventually, they caved. They paid. Every cent plus damages. And I used that money to open a small studio space downtown. A quiet room with tall windows and high ceilings where I could paint, design, and breathe. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't huge. But it was mine. The best part? I never heard from them again. Not for holidays. Not for birthdays. Not when Eric and his wife had their second baby. Not even when Dad retired and Mom posted about it on social media like it was a royal coronation. They cut me out. And for once, I wasn't sad about it. Because for the first time in my life, I felt free. Not angry. Not broken. Just free. I still have the place card. The failure. I keep it in a drawer at the studio. Not out of bitterness, but as a reminder that sometimes walking away isn't failure. It's survival. It's self-respect. It's the first step toward a life you don't need to justify to anyone, especially not the people who only called you family when it was convenient. I'm 24, and my name is Emily. If you'd asked me 5 years ago what I thought my relationship with my family would look like today, I would have painted a picture full of warmth, support, and maybe a little bit of that tough love everyone talks about. But what actually happened is, well, let's just say I got a huge lesson in self-reliance and the true meaning of family expectations. It all started when I was in high school. I wasn't the perfect student, never was, but I always tried. I worked hard to keep my grades decent and participated in extracurriculars. Honestly, I wanted to go to college, get a degree, and carve out a career for myself. That was the dream, right? But my parents, they weren't exactly on the same page. They had always been tough on me, especially my mom. She's a high achiever, always pushing, always striving. Dad wasn't as vocal about it, but I could tell he didn't want to coddle me either. I was the second child, and the unspoken rule was that I had to figure things out for myself. My older brother, Aaron, was their golden boy. Smart, athletic, the type to get straight A's without breaking a sweat. I couldn't compete with that. Anyway, senior year rolled around, and the whole college talk began. My brother had already been accepted to a prestigious university, and my parents were gearing up for his tuition. But for me, it felt like pulling teeth. Every time I brought up applications or financial aid, my mom would brush it off. You'll figure it out, she'd say. We'll focus on Aaron first. He needs it more. I wasn't even sure what that meant. But being the dutiful daughter, I didn't argue. I started researching scholarships and working part-time jobs, trying to save whatever I could. My friends' parents were a lot more involved in their kids' futures, but not mine. Then came the Saturday afternoon. I was sitting in the kitchen, doing my homework, when my mom walked in with a stern look on her face. She sat down across from me and said, We've decided to use your college fund to pay for Erin's tuition." I froze. My stomach dropped, and for a moment, I thought I misheard her. "Wait, what?" "You heard me," she replied, barely looking up from her phone. "He's got a better chance of getting into a top-tier school. His future is more important." I blinked, trying to process it. "But that's my fund. You told me it was for me." "Emily, you don't need a top-tier school," she said, dismissing me with a wave. "You'll be fine. You're smart. You can make do with a state school or a community college. We can't afford both. Erin's opportunities are bigger. He needs this." I remember the feeling of my hands shaking. I didn't know what to say. I felt betrayed, but mostly, I felt invisible. "So, what do you want me to do?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't know," my mom said nonchalantly. "Figure it out. You always do." I went numb. That night, I stared at the ceiling, trying to figure out what had just happened. My parents had given my college fund, my future, away without even blinking, and they expected me to just figure it out. I didn't talk to them much about it after that. I didn't yell, didn't protest, but something inside me snapped. This was my life, my future, and they were treating it like it was a footnote in Erin's story. It wasn't fair, and I wasn't going to let it slide. So, I did figure it out. I found scholarships. Lots of them. I worked multiple jobs, barely sleeping, saving every penny. I was determined to make it on my own, without a single cent from my parents. I got accepted to a good college on my own merit, and I proudly told my parents when I received my acceptance letter. They were less than thrilled. Mom asked if I needed any help with tuition, but I refused. I didn't need their charity. The next few years were hard, but I kept pushing. I hustled through my studies, worked my way up in part-time jobs, and learned a budget like a pro. I had to grow up fast. Then came graduation day. I walked across the stage to get my degree, my heart pounding with pride. I had done it. Alone. But of course, that wasn't the end of the story. A few months later, things started to take a strange turn. Erin had graduated a few weeks before me, but he was having a much harder time finding a job. His college had cost a fortune, and while he'd had the best of everything, the real world didn't seem to care about how prestigious his degree was. He was struggling with his student loans, and I could see the frustration building up in him. One day, he called me. "Hey, Em," he said, his voice tinged with frustration. "I need help with some of my bills. Can you lend me a little money? You're doing better than me, right?" I stared at my phone in disbelief. This was the same guy who'd gotten the full college fund. The same guy who never had to worry about working a single shift in high school. And now, he was asking me for help? I knew I should have said no. I knew I should have told him to figure it out like I had to. But something in me snapped. Maybe it was all the years of watching him get everything handed to him while I had to fight for every little bit. Maybe it was the realization that he was still expecting me to bail him out. "I don't know if I can help you," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "I've worked really hard to get here, and I'm barely keeping up with my own expenses." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Erin sighed. "It's not like you need the money. You've got your degree. You're doing fine." My heart started to pound again. The nerve. After everything, after all the sacrifices I'd made, he still thought that way. He still thought I owed him something. I couldn't take it anymore. "Erin," I said, my voice cold, "you've had everything handed to you on a silver platter. I've had to fight for everything, including my degree. And now you're asking me for help?" He didn't respond immediately, and when he did, his voice was thick with irritation. "Don't get all high and mighty on me, Emily. I'm just asking for some help." That was when it hit me. He wasn't just entitled to my money, to my support. He felt entitled to my success too. But I wasn't done yet. This wasn't just about Erin. It wasn't just about my brother and me. It was about everything that had happened over the last few years. The way my parents had treated me. The way they never had my back when it mattered. And so, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this slide anymore. If they wanted a piece of my success, they were going to have to earn it. The next time I saw my parents, I was ready. It was a Saturday afternoon, and my parents invited me over for lunch. I knew what this was about. Erin had probably mentioned his struggles again, and they were going to try to guilt-trip me into helping him. But this time, I wasn't going to just sit there and take it. I showed up to their house with my mind made up. I had just gotten a decent promotion at my job, and I was feeling more confident than I had in years. I was done being the little sister who got overlooked, done being the easy option whenever someone needed help. I had worked for every step of my success, and it was time they understood that. As I walked in, my mom was in the kitchen, fussing over the stove, while my dad sat at the table, flipping through a newspaper. Aaron was already there, sitting with his usual smug expression, sipping on a cup of coffee. "Emily, honey, good to see you." My mom greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I noticed she hadn't set a place for me at the table. It was just Aaron. I didn't say anything right away. I just pulled out a chair and sat down, making myself comfortable. They were all a little too quiet, and I could feel the tension building. Aaron was the first to break the silence. "So, about the money," he trailed off, not quite looking at me. I could feel my stomach tighten. Here it was, the moment I'd been dreading and preparing for. My mom chimed in quickly, eager to push things along. "Aaron's having some financial struggles, Emily. I know you're doing well now, so we were hoping." She paused, giving me that look, like I was supposed to just do the right thing without question. "Maybe you could help him out a little? Loan him some money, or..." "I can't." I cut in, not waiting for her to finish. "I've got my own bills to pay, and I don't have extra funds lying around to bail out someone who's been given everything." Aaron looked surprised, but my mom narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean?" "You're not struggling, Emily. You have a good job, and you're doing well. You could afford to help your brother out." I kept my voice steady, though I could feel the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. "Mom, I worked my ass off for everything I have. I didn't get a free ride like Aaron. I didn't get my college fund handed to me. You never helped me figure it out when I needed it, but I did it. So, no, I'm not going to hand over money just because you think I owe it to him." There was a long pause as my words sank in. My mom's face flushed with indignation, and Aaron's eyes widened in disbelief. It was like they couldn't quite grasp the fact that I wasn't just going to roll over. "But he's your brother," my mom snapped, her voice rising. "Family helps family. You've got a stable job now. Don't be so selfish." My dad, who had been quiet up until then, set down the newspaper and gave me a look I couldn't quite read. "Emily, your mom's right. We're family. Aaron needs help, and you're doing well now. Don't you think it's time to give back?" That's when it hit me. Their logic wasn't about fairness. It wasn't about helping Aaron because he needed it. It was about guilt-tripping me into doing what they wanted because I was the successful one now. "I'm not giving back to someone who doesn't respect what I've worked for," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "If Aaron can't figure out his own finances after all these years of being handed everything, that's on him. Not me. Not you. You've raised him to expect people to solve his problems for him, and I'm done playing along." Aaron looked like I'd slapped him. "So, that's it. You're just going to turn your back on your family because you think you're better than us now." I could feel my chest tightening. "I'm not better than you, Aaron. I'm just different. I don't expect anyone to do things for me. I never did. And you can't keep acting like I owe you anything." Mom jumped in, her voice trembling. "Emily, you've changed. You used to be a good daughter. We always expected you to help your brother, and now you're just going to leave us all behind." I could feel a lump forming in my throat. This wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about years of resentment building up, years of feeling overlooked and dismissed. It was about them expecting me to be the backup plan when they couldn't be bothered to give me the same opportunities they'd given Aaron. "I'm not leaving anyone behind," I said, my voice soft but firm. "But I'm not going to let you treat me like I'm your fallback anymore. I'm not your safety net. I'm my own person. And I've earned everything I've got, just like I'll earn everything I get in the future." The room went silent. My mom and dad exchanged looks, and Aaron just sat there, fuming. I could feel the weight of their disappointment on me, but I didn't care. Not anymore. "Well," my dad finally said, breaking the silence, "if that's how you feel, then I guess we'll have to figure out how to handle this on our own." I didn't respond. I just stood up from the table. "Yeah, you will." I didn't stick around for any more of the conversation. I grabbed my coat and walked out, leaving behind the family that had always expected me to bend to their will. The days that followed were tense. My mom tried calling a few times, but I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to hear their excuses. Aaron texted me a couple of times too, saying I was being selfish and that I was ruining the family. But I wasn't going to fall for it. I had made my choice, and I wasn't going to back down. But here's where it gets interesting. A week later, my mom called me again. This time, her tone was different. It wasn't the angry, demanding tone she'd had before. It was almost apologetic. "Emily," she said, "I think we need to talk." I was hesitant at first, but something told me this was a turning point. I agreed to meet up with her at a coffee shop, and that's where everything took a surprising turn. When I sat down, she didn't start with an apology. Instead, she just looked at me with this tired expression, like she'd been carrying something heavy for a long time. "I was wrong," Emily, she said quietly. You've always had to figure things out on your own, and I didn't realize how much I was contributing to that. I'm sorry. I was taken aback. Was she actually apologizing? I didn't know how to react. And Aaron, she continued, her voice cracking slightly, he's not your responsibility. I shouldn't have put that on you. I can see now that you've worked harder than anyone to get where you are, and I'm proud of you. For the first time, I saw my mom not as someone trying to control me, but as someone who was finally admitting the mistakes she'd made. But there was still more to the story. And that's when I realized I wasn't done yet. I hadn't fully settled the score. There was one final piece of the puzzle that I was about to turn. I listened to her for a while, my mind swirling with everything she was saying. It was clear that my mom was in a vulnerable place, probably realizing just how much she had relied on me to pick up the slack when things with Aaron didn't go as planned. But there was something else beneath her apology, something I couldn't quite place. I didn't trust it yet. I appreciate the apology, Mom, I said carefully, but I don't think one conversation is going to undo everything. You can't just expect me to jump into this role again. I'm not the backup plan anymore. She nodded, looking defeated. I know. I can't change everything that's happened, but I can try to do better. You deserve that. I wasn't sure if I believed her. This was the same woman who had pushed me to the sidelines for years in favor of Aaron. The same one who had told me to figure it out when it came to my college fund and then handed everything over to him. Could I really trust her now? Just as I was about to respond, I saw a figure walking toward our table. It was Aaron, looking unusually tense. My heart sank a little. Emily, we need to talk, he said bluntly, glancing at our coffee cups before sitting down across from me. He was wearing that familiar defensive expression I had grown so used to, like he was gearing up for a fight. I don't want to talk to you, Aaron, I replied sharply, feeling my frustration building again. You made your choice, and I made mine. I'm not your financial safety net. I've told you that. Aaron shifted in his seat, clearly irritated but trying to keep calm. I get it. You think I'm some spoiled kid who's never had to work for anything. But that's not what this is about. I need help, Emily. I don't have anyone else to turn to. I could feel the anger rise again. There it was, the familiar tone, the same old excuse. You've always had someone to turn to, Aaron. You just didn't want to do the work. You wanted everything handed to you, and I'm done enabling you. You don't get it, Aaron said, his voice rising now. I made mistakes, okay? I've messed up. But I can't do this on my own anymore. You've always been there for me in the past, and now you're just leaving me hanging. I stared at him for a long moment, trying to keep my composure. The urge to snap, to finally tell him how much I resented him, how much I resented everything about the way he'd been treated differently his whole life, was overwhelming. But I forced myself to stay calm. You want me to help you, Aaron? Fine. But not like this. Not just because you expect it. You have to show me you're ready to take responsibility for your own life. I'm not bailing you out anymore. I could see the frustration in his eyes, but he didn't argue. Instead, he sat back, looking defeated. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. I had to stop myself from saying something cruel. This was the moment where things could either change or stay the same, and it wasn't up to me to decide for him. He had to make the choice himself. My mom, who had been sitting quietly during our conversation, spoke up then. Emily's right, Aaron. I'm sorry, but we've been enabling you for too long. I'm not going to keep making excuses for you. You've got to make your own way. Aaron's face turned red, and for a second, I thought he might shout. But then, to my surprise, he just sighed deeply. Fine. I'll figure it out then. I was taken aback by his words. It wasn't the angry, defensive response I'd expected. It was almost like he was admitting defeat, but also acknowledging that he might need to change. I wasn't sure if this was the beginning of some kind of breakthrough or just another empty promise. There was a long silence after that. My mom shifted uncomfortably in her seat, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were all sitting at a crossroads. Things were changing, but I wasn't ready to trust it yet. All right, I said finally, standing up from the table. I'm going to go. I have things to do. My mom looked like she wanted to say more, but I didn't stick around long enough to hear it. I needed space. I needed time to think. As I walked out of the coffee shop, I felt a strange mix of relief and tension. It was like we had taken a small step toward healing, but the road was still long. I didn't know if Aaron was really ready to change, and I didn't know if my parents could really understand the damage they had done. But something had shifted today, and that was all I could focus on for now. The real test, I knew, was yet to come. Over the next few days, I tried to focus on my own life, my work, my plans, and everything that had been pushed to the background for so long. But there was this gnawing feeling in the back of my mind that wouldn't let go. It was the uncertainty about what would come next, especially with Aaron and my parents. I wanted to believe things could change, but I had spent so many years expecting something that never came that I wasn't sure I could trust them again. Aaron didn't reach out immediately, which was a bit surprising. Usually, if he wanted something, he would call or text, trying to worm his way back into my good graces. But this time, nothing. It made me feel like maybe, just maybe, he was finally understanding that the world didn't revolve around him. But then, about 4 days later, I received a message from him. The text was brief but to the point. "We need to talk. Can you meet me at the house?" I didn't even hesitate before replying, "Sure. I'll be there in an hour." When I got to the house, it felt different. Not in a good way, but in that oppressive, heavy way that you know something bad is about to happen. I walked in through the front door and found Aaron sitting on the couch, looking like he hadn't slept in days. He was wearing his old hoodie, the one I used to borrow when I was younger. "Hey," I said, not sure what to expect. My tone was flat, even though there was a whirlwind of emotions inside. "What's going on?" Aaron didn't look up right away. He was holding his phone in his hands, his fingers tapping nervously on the screen. I stood there for a moment, waiting for him to speak, but he remained silent. "Look, I don't have all day," I said, more impatient than I meant to be. "You asked me to come, so let's get to it." Finally, Aaron looked up at me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he didn't look angry or entitled. He looked lost. "I need help, he said quietly. More than I ever have before. I crossed my arms, bracing myself. "I know you need help, Aaron, but I've already told you that I'm not here to fix things for you. Not anymore." His eyes widened slightly, and he leaned forward. "It's not like that, okay? It's not just about money. It's about everything. I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I've messed up so many times, and I'm scared. I don't know how to fix it." I could hear the sincerity in his voice, but I didn't know if I could believe it. He had said similar things before, only to go back to his old ways once things got hard. It felt like a repeat of every conversation we'd ever had. "So what do you want from me, Aaron?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "You want me to give you money again? Bail you out? Because that's not happening. I'm not that person anymore." He shook his head quickly, almost desperately. "No, it's not about money. I just feel like I've been given nothing but second chances, and I keep messing up. I need advice. I need direction. I need someone who actually believes in me for once." I could feel the frustration bubbling up again. This was it, the same cycle. I could hear the excuses wrapped up in his plea for help. He wanted a quick fix, something to make the pain go away without putting in the work. And yet, there was a small part of me, buried deep down, that wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that he was finally ready to change. "I'm sorry, Aaron," I said, my voice softer now. "But I've been trying to help you for years. Every time I step in, it feels like I'm enabling you. I can't do that anymore." Aaron's face crumpled, and he slammed his fist against the couch. "This is what I mean, Emily. Every time I try to get my life together, everyone just tells me I'm doing it wrong. No one's ever given me the chance to actually fix myself." I could see the anger building in him, but it wasn't the same self-righteous anger I was used to. This was something deeper, something raw. Still, I couldn't let him off the hook just because he was upset. "You've had plenty of chances, Aaron. It's not about what anyone else is doing to you. It's about what you're doing to yourself. You can't keep blaming everyone else for your mistakes." He looked away, his face clouded with shame. I hated how much it hurt to see him like this. But it wasn't enough for me to forget what he had done, or what my parents had done. This was his moment to prove that he could take responsibility, and I wasn't about to swoop in and rescue him. "I'm not going to fix things for you, Aaron," I repeated firmly, my tone final. "You have to do that. And I'm not going to watch it happen again if you're not serious about changing." The silence that followed was thick, and I could feel the weight of it between us. I had set my boundaries. I had told him the truth. Now it was his turn to step up. But just as I was about to leave, Aaron spoke again, his voice quieter this time, almost as if he were speaking to himself. "You know, I never thought I'd say this, but I think I'm really starting to get what you meant. Maybe I've been too blind to see it before." I didn't know if I believed him, but I nodded. "Good. Now go prove it." I walked out of the house without looking back, trying to convince myself that I'd done the right thing. But as I drove home, I couldn't help but wonder, had I finally pushed him too far? Or was this the turning point for Aaron? The days that followed were a strange mixture of relief and unease. It felt like I had finally drawn a line in the sand, but that line was still precarious, like it could be washed away by the tide at any moment. I kept telling myself I had done the right thing, that I couldn't keep bending over backward for people who had shown me time and time again that my efforts didn't matter unless it benefited them. But as much as I tried to convince myself that I was at peace, I still found myself checking my phone every few hours, waiting for a text from Aaron or my mom. A part of me kept hoping that maybe this time would be different. Maybe they'd finally understood. Then, one night, I got a text from my mom. It was short and to the point. "We need to talk. Your brother is having a hard time. Please, come over." I stared at the message for a long time, feeling the familiar knot in my stomach tighten. I knew what this meant: another round of poor Aaron, another attempt to guilt me into doing something I didn't want to do. But part of me still felt that nagging pull, the part that wanted to help, to fix things, to be the good daughter, the good sister. I stared at the text for a few more seconds before typing back, "I'm not coming. Not this time." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. There was a finality to it that I hadn't realized I needed until the message was gone. It wasn't long before the phone rang. It was my mom. I debated answering, but I wasn't in the mood for another round of manipulation. I let it ring out. A few minutes later, I received a voicemail. "Emily, please. Aaron's really struggling. He's asking for you. I know you're angry, but your family. Please, just come. He's not handling this well." I took a deep breath, my heart aching for Aaron in spite of everything. But I couldn't go back. Not when I had already given so much. Not when they had already taken so much from me. I didn't call back. The next few days were quiet. I went about my life, focusing on my work, my own plans, and my own mental health. There were moments when I thought about Aaron and my mom, wondering if I had made the right choice by not giving in. But then I remembered everything they had put me through. I wasn't just some safety net they could fall back on when things got tough. I wasn't going to be their doormat anymore. It was late one evening when I finally saw Aaron's name pop up on my phone. He was calling again, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to talk to him yet. The last few conversations had left me feeling exhausted and drained, as if I had been giving and giving without ever getting anything in return. I let it ring out. The next morning, another text from Aaron. "I know I messed up. I know you're upset, and I get it. But I need you, Em. Please don't turn your back on me now." My thumb hovered over the reply button, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. It would have been easy to give in, to slip back into that old habit of trying to fix everything for him. But I knew better now. I typed a simple response. "I'm sorry, Aaron, but I've done everything I can. You need to figure this out on your own." There was no reply for a while, and I felt a strange sense of finality. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but I was beginning to realize it was also the best thing I could do for myself. A few days later, I got a call from my mom. I hesitated, but eventually, I answered. "Emily, please, you have to understand," she began, her voice frantic. "He's still struggling, and I don't know what to do. I can't help him anymore. You're the only one who can fix this." I sighed, rubbing my temples. "Mom, I've already told you, I can't fix him. I can't keep putting myself on the line for someone who doesn't even try to help themselves. But he's your brother. Don't you care? Don't you love him?" Her voice wavered with emotion. "I do love him, Mom," I replied, trying to keep my tone steady. "But that doesn't mean I have to sacrifice myself every time he messes up. I've tried to help, but he needs to take responsibility for his own life. I can't keep being his crutch." There was silence on the other end for a long moment, and I knew she was struggling to accept what I was saying. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just don't want to lose you too." "You haven't lost me, Mom," I said, my voice softer now. "But I need you to understand that I'm not going to let you use me as a fallback anymore. I can't keep doing this for Aaron, and I can't keep doing this for you." There was another long pause, and then she sighed deeply. "I guess I'll have to find another way." I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure what else to say. I had done what I could, and I was finally starting to feel the weight of everything I had been carrying for so long begin to lift. It wasn't that I didn't love my family, it was that I loved myself more. I was tired of playing the role of the savior, the fixer, the one who always stepped in when things went wrong. I had spent too many years putting everyone else's needs before my own, and I wasn't going to do that anymore. In the end, I didn't forgive them. Not in the way they wanted me to. What I did instead was give myself the space I needed to heal and to move forward with my life on my own terms. My family might never understand that, but I was done trying to make them. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally in control of my own story. My name's Eric, I'm 33, and if you asked anyone in my family, they'd probably describe me with one word: dependable. Not in the warm, fuzzy way, though. More like the kind of dependable you'd use to describe a vending machine. Punch in a number, and it gives you what you want. I didn't come from money, but I worked my way into it. Coding, consulting, investing. I grinded for years while my cousins partied, while my uncles racked up debts and blamed the economy, and while everyone else just kind of existed. I didn't mind at first. I liked helping. I liked being the guy who could show up and quietly take care of things. My mom used to say, "You're a good man, Eric. It's okay to take care of your people." And for a long time, I believed that. But lately something had been eating at me. It wasn't any one thing. It was more like death by 1,000 slices. Like how my Aunt Diane always introduced me as the one who works with computers or whatever. Or how my cousin Nate joked that I should start carrying a checkbook to every family function. It was the way they made group decisions without me, but then expected me to foot the bill. A pattern I had been too exhausted, too guilt, or too brainwashed to confront. Still, I let it slide. Because confronting it would mean facing something uglier, that I wasn't respected. Just used. The tipping point came on a Wednesday. It was late afternoon. I had just finished a call with a client in Singapore, and I was debating whether to skip dinner or microwave some sad leftovers, when my phone buzzed. Uncle Ray, mobile. I didn't answer, it went to voicemail. Then, 5 seconds later, it rang again. I was about to let it go again, but something made me swipe. I put it on speaker, more out of laziness than anything, and just said, "Hey, Uncle Ray." Except, Uncle Ray didn't respond. Instead, what I heard was him laughing. Loud, wheezy, and mean, the kind of laugh that made my stomach clench before I even knew why. I'm just saying, his voice rang out. He thinks throwing money around makes him family. Like, no joke, he actually believes we like him. Someone else snorted in the background. My stomach dropped. "Oh, come on, Ray," said a voice I instantly recognized, my cousin Nate. "He's a walking debit card. That's it. I mean, you think he'd get invited to half these things if he wasn't paying for the venue or the catering?" Laughter again. A third voice, probably Aunt Diane, added, "I told you, he's not generous, he's insecure. He needs to feel needed." It's kind of sad, really. I didn't speak. I didn't hang up. I just stood there, frozen, listening to my own blood rip me apart like I was nothing more than a line item on a budget spreadsheet. Uncle Ray again. I mean, if he wasn't such a pathetic ATM, I'd feel bad. But he owes us. We raised him after his mom passed, didn't we? Now he's just paying it back. That's how I see it. I hung up. I couldn't breathe for a minute. Not out of rage, not yet. It was something deeper. That kind of hollow ache you feel when the foundation cracks under your feet. My chest felt tight. These weren't strangers. This was the family that hugged me on holidays, that thanked me for covering Nate's rent, that smiled when I picked up the tab at Grandma's 80th. They had looked me in the eye and said, "You're such a blessing to this family." And then, behind my back, I was just the ATM. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the call over and over like some twisted podcast. Part of me wanted to call back and confront them right away. Another part, the colder part, told me to wait. Let it stew. Let them believe I hadn't heard anything. So I waited. The next day, I went through my bank statements and made a list. It was longer than I thought. Monthly payments I'd set up years ago and forgotten about. Ray's car note. Nate's gym membership. Aunt Diane's phone plan. I'd even been covering the insurance on Grandma's house because she couldn't afford it anymore. In all, it was nearly $2,600 a month. And that didn't even include the one-off things: vacations, tuition down payments, emergency repairs. I was a full-fledged, multi-service subscription plan. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I just logged into each account, canceled every auto payment, and removed my card from everything. It took a couple hours, but when I was done, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not triumphant, not smug, just clear. 3 days later, the text started. First from Nate. "Yo, did my gym mess up? My card got declined, LOL, can you check?" Then Diane. "Verizon says the payment didn't go through." Then Ray. "We got a late notice on the car loan. Did you forget?" I ignored them. That's when the calls came. Dozens. First calm, then confused, then frantic. I let them all go to voicemail. On the 4th day, I got a text from my aunt that just said, "Call us. Now." Something's wrong. No, something wasn't wrong. Something had finally been corrected. But I didn't reply. I just sat there, sipping my coffee as my phone buzzed nonstop. Each ring was a little echo of their panic, a little reminder that they were only reaching out now because the gravy train had skidded to a stop. That evening, I checked my messages again. One from Ray stood out. "You're being childish. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? This is family, Eric. You don't just cut us off. We count on you." That one made me laugh. A short, bitter sound I barely recognized coming from myself. But it was the message after that, the one from my cousin Nate, that made me pause. It was a voice message, only 10 seconds long, but dripping with the kind of entitlement that lights a fire under your spine. "Okay, seriously, Eric? You think cutting us off makes you better than us? You're not. You're just a lonely loser who uses money to buy love. Good luck with that." I didn't reply to Nate's voice message. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I didn't even roll my eyes. I just listened to it again, twice, and then sat in the quiet, letting it sink in. There was something freeing about it, honestly. The mask was off. They'd finally said the quiet part out loud. The next morning, I opened a fresh Google Doc and titled it Housekeeping. I went through my calendar, bank logs, and emails, basically doing an audit of every string they'd ever attached to me. Anything I had funded, subscribed to, co-signed, or connected myself to for anyone in the family went on that list. And as I added each entry, I started typing up the details of the arrangement, just to remind myself how things had gone down. Ray's car loan took over payments in 2021 after he temporarily lost his job. Has not made a single payment since. Car's in my name. Nate's rent. Paid 6 months of back rent in 2022 to avoid his eviction. He swore he'd pay me back, with interest. He didn't. Then asked for help again when he got fired. Paid again. Still unpaid. Aunt Diane's phone plan. Added her to my family plan in 2020. Said she'd Venmo monthly. Hasn't in 18 months. It was grotesque seeing it all laid out. And worse, remembering how each time they'd made me feel like doing this for them was the bare minimum. That I was somehow a bad person if I didn't help. That helping was proof I loved the family. I thought about that a lot. About how their love always seemed to come with invoices attached. By the afternoon, I had a list of 11 active financial ties, all of which I'd now severed. The only one I left untouched was my grandma. She was the only one who'd never asked for a cent. In fact, she was the only one who ever refused when I offered. I remembered one time, years ago, I tried to pay for her prescriptions, and she looked me straight in the eye and said, "If you want to help me, sit down and talk to me once a week. That's the only payment I need." I'd been so busy since then, I hadn't visited her in months. That changed immediately. I drove to her house that Sunday. She opened the door like she always did, with a smile and a plate of something warm, homemade cheese bread this time. I hugged her, and for the first time in weeks, my chest didn't feel tight. "You okay, sweetheart?" she asked, eyeing me like only a grandma can. "I will be," I said. She patted my cheek. "Then come in and eat." We talked for 2 hours. Not about the others. Just about her garden, about how she hated her new doctor, about the book club she'd quit because some people think sarcasm is rude, apparently. I left feeling more grounded than I had in years. On the way home, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me, so I played it once I parked. "Eric, this is Carla, Ray's wife. I know things are tense right now, but I just wanted to say we didn't mean for you to hear that. Ray was just blowing off steam. He's been stressed, and, well, you know how families are. Please don't do anything drastic. Let's just talk, okay? You're still part of this family." That was the moment I realized they still thought they could fix this with words. That if they just said the right blend of guilt and sweetness, I'd crawl back like I always had. But I was done crawling. That night, I did something drastic. I called my lawyer. Not for anything crazy. No lawsuits. No scorched earth nonsense. Just a simple consultation. I asked how to legally reclaim my name from anything tied to theirs. It turned out Ray's car was in my name, but the insurance? Registered under his. That could have gone very badly if he'd crashed it. My lawyer raised an eyebrow and said, "You're lucky they haven't gotten you sued." So we started the process. Certified letters went out the next day. Car repossession initiated. Lease agreement terminated. Phone line disconnected. The works. I didn't say a word to anyone. But apparently, The silence hit harder than anything I could have said, because by Thursday night, my voicemail inbox was full again. Not with jokes, not with guilt trips, with screaming. Ray left a 6-minute message swearing at me without actually cursing, which was impressive. Diane's message sounded like she'd been crying. Nate just yelled into the phone. "You think this is funny? You think you're better than us?" "No, Nate. I know I'm better than this." Then came the group chat message. Family chat, 16 participants. "Ray, Eric, you've made your point. Now undo it. Before someone gets seriously hurt. Aunt Diane, you're punishing everyone for one dumb conversation. Please think about how this looks. Nate, bro, you're sabotaging your own blood. Don't forget where you came from." That one made me laugh out loud. Because I hadn't forgotten. They had. Every time they took, every time they whispered, every time they turned me into a wallet with a heartbeat, they were the ones who forgot. And now they were panicking because I was reminding them. I didn't reply. Not yet. But I did book something. The same venue where I'd paid for Nate's 30th birthday. The one with the rooftop and private bar. I booked it for a Thursday night and put down a deposit. Then I made a guest list of my own. Friends. Colleagues. People who never asked me for a dime, but always made time for me. People who didn't treat kindness like a transaction. The invite. Simple. Thanks for sticking around when you didn't have to. Drinks are on me. No strings attached. The RSVP list filled up in a day. And right when I thought everything had settled, that I'd finally untangled myself from their mess, something happened that made my stomach flip. I got a notification from my bank. My heart sank as I stared at the notification on my screen. A $9,800 charge. Attempted by Ray. On a dusty, forgotten joint account I'd opened years ago, back when I still believed where family meant something deeper than convenience. I opened the banking app and scrolled back. The account hadn't been touched in over 2 years. It was originally created when Uncle Ray claimed he needed help rebuilding his credit after a bankruptcy. "Just until I get back on my feet," he said, shaking my hand like we were making a sacred pact. I'd kept a few hundred in it, out of habit. Not because I trusted him, but because I forgot it even existed. The balance had sat there, untouched until now. The transaction had been flagged for exceeding daily limits. It hadn't gone through. But that wasn't what worried me. It was the fact that he tried. He must have realized his safety net was vanishing, that the golden goose was getting away. And instead of calling to apologize or owning up to anything, he thought he could just reach in and help himself one last time. Almost 10 grand. No explanation. No warning. Just take. I locked the account immediately. Froze the card. Called the bank and requested full removal of his access. The agent on the other end paused when I explained the situation. "You're not the first to call about something like this," she said quietly. I didn't know what she meant, but I didn't ask. I was too busy feeling that cold, electric blend of rage and disbelief bubbling up in my chest. This wasn't just passive leeching anymore. This was theft. And that changed everything. I texted Ray directly for the first time since I heard the voicemail. "You tried to steal from me. I suggest you think very carefully about what you do next. Because now it's not just family business. Now it's legal." He didn't reply. But 2 minutes later, my phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. Then again. Finally, I picked up. Not out of curiosity, out of strategy. His voice cracked the second I answered. "Eric, listen, man. I didn't." I cut him off. "Stop talking." Dead silence. I could feel the heat rising behind my eyes, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed him to panic, not me. "You tried to move $10,000 out of an account you don't own. Do you understand what that means, Ray?" He fumbled. "It wasn't like that. I just thought, maybe you'd left it there for. You thought you'd get away with it. That's what you thought." I kept my voice low, calm, which somehow made it even more terrifying. "After everything I've done for you. After all the times I bailed you out. I heard what you said, Ray. I heard everything." Silence. Then, "Eric." I was just venting. You know how family talks. It wasn't personal. That's when I laughed. A short, sharp bark that startled even me. Wasn't personal? I was the topic, Ray. It doesn't get more personal than that. He tried again, voice cracking. "Come on, kid. You know I've always had your back." "No, you've always had your hand out. And I'm done pretending not to notice." He started raising his voice. "You think you're better than us now? You think money gives you the right to judge?" "No," I said, ice in my throat. "I think character gives me the right. And you haven't shown a shred of it." I hung up. My hands were shaking, but I felt clean. That kind of clean you only feel when you finally take out the trash after pretending you couldn't smell it. The next day, I called my lawyer again. This time, we went over every single legal thread Ray could pull. I had him formally removed from the joint account, had my name removed from any remaining assets tied to his, and initiated documentation for attempted unauthorized withdrawal. We didn't press charges, yet, but we filed a formal notice with the bank, which meant if he tried anything again, it would become very real, very fast. 2 days later, I started getting messages from extended family members I hadn't heard from in years. A second cousin I barely remembered DM'd me on Facebook. "Hey, just wanted to check in. Ray's telling everyone you're threatening to sue him? What's going on?" Then an uncle from out of state. "This sounds messy. Are you sure this isn't just a misunderstanding?" And then, finally, Grandma called. That one made me hesitate. I picked up on the first ring. "Eric, honey," she said gently, "you doing okay?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Yeah, Grandma. I'm okay now. I've been hearing some things. Things I don't like. About Ray. About what he did." I didn't answer. Just waited. "I want you to know," she continued, voice a little shaky, "you're not wrong for protecting yourself. You gave them more than most people ever would. But there comes a time when love has to stop making excuses." My throat tightened. "Thanks, Grandma." She sighed. "They'll twist it, you know. They already are. Saying you've changed. Saying you think you're better." "I have changed," I said quietly. I just finally started listening to what they were saying behind my back. We talked a while longer. She asked if I was still coming by for dinner. I said of course. Then she said something that stayed with me all night. "They'll try to punish you for growing. Don't let them." That weekend, I hosted the rooftop party I'd planned. The people who showed up? Real friends. Clients I respected. One of my mentors from my first job. A guy I once tutored who now ran his own tech startup. The room was full of laughter, music, clinking glasses, and zero manipulation. I raised a glass halfway through and said, "Thank you for showing me that I don't have to pay for love. That being appreciated isn't supposed to come with a receipt." They clapped, cheered, toasted. And then, right when I thought the storm had passed, right when I was thinking maybe, just maybe, the drama was behind me, my phone lit up with a message from a contact I hadn't spoken to in 10 years. "Dad." He wasn't at the party. He wasn't supposed to know about the party. But the message was short. "Looks like you made quite the mess. I hope you're ready for what comes next." The message from my father shouldn't have shaken me. But it did. I hadn't spoken to him in over a decade. He left when I was 15, walked out after one too many fights with Mom, and when she passed a few years later, he didn't even show up to the funeral. I told myself he no longer existed. Easier that way. Cleaner. But there he was, popping up like a ghost. One sentence, no greeting, no apology, just a threat wrapped in vague smugness. "Looks like you made quite the mess. I hope you're ready for what comes next." For a moment, I just stared at the screen. Part of me wondered if Ray had pulled him out of the woodwork, if this was some pathetic last-ditch effort to guilt-trip me into folding. If so, they had no idea who they were dealing with anymore. I didn't reply. Not to him. Not to any of them. But what I did next was probably the most satisfying part of this entire ordeal. Over the years, I'd quietly kept a digital folder of everything. Receipts, Venmo screenshots, payment confirmations. Every time someone in the family said, "Just this once," or "Can you spot me?" I logged it. Not out of paranoia. At first, I just wanted to track how much I was giving. Then it became something else. Proof. Evidence. Insurance. So I compiled it all into one beautiful, brutally organized PDF. The cover page was titled, "For the Record." It included $3,800 to cover Nate's rent in 2022, $1,200 for his emergency dental surgery the following year, $7,000 in cumulative payments toward Ray's car note over 3 years, $650 per month for Aunt Diane's phone plan across 2 lines, $9,300 toward various family emergencies over a 4-year span, $2,000 for a weekend cabin trip I wasn't even invited to attend. In total, $47,200. And that was just the money I could prove. Then I wrote a statement. Just 1 page. No rants. No personal jabs. Just the facts. This document exists not as revenge, but as release. You've mistaken silence for weakness, kindness for obligation, and generosity for stupidity. I don't expect repayment. I expect closure. This is the last time I will ever finance your lies. I emailed it to the family group chat, to Uncle Ray and Diane, Nate, and yes, even my father. I didn't say anything else. Then I blocked them all, one by one. Phone, email, socials. It felt surgical, like removing a tumor I'd been living with so long. I didn't even remember what it felt like to be healthy. That night, I slept like a rock. No dreams. No regrets. The fallout was nuclear. Apparently, they tried to respond, begged, raged, tried to rope in cousins and distant aunts I hadn't seen since high school. But their messages bounced. Their calls rang once and dropped. My voicemail remained empty. And when they realized I was serious, that I wasn't coming back, that's when they turned to the one place they still had control. They started telling their version of the story. Suddenly, I was arrogant, ungrateful, twisted by money. Ray told people I falsely accused him of theft. Nate said I abandoned the family over a joke. Diane claimed I was emotionally unstable and needed help. But you know what? Nobody who mattered believed them. Because for the first time in my life, I had surrounded myself with people who actually knew me. Not the caricature my family had created, the ATM with legs, but me. The guy who stayed up until 3 a.m. helping friends prep for interviews. The guy who once donated anonymously to cover a coworker's medical bills. The guy who spent years keeping a crumbling family afloat, only to be laughed at behind his back. Those people, they stood by me. A week after the rooftop party, my mentor called and said, "That toast you gave? I think that was the real beginning of your life." He was right. I stopped paying for approval, and I started investing in peace. I picked up old hobbies I had let die under the weight of obligation. I joined a local photography club. I signed up for weekend hikes. I volunteered at a youth coding nonprofit on Saturdays, teaching high schoolers the skills that had once given me a lifeline. And slowly, I started healing. Then, 3 months after the fallout, I got one last letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. It was from my dad. The envelope was thick, pages upon pages folded carefully inside. I almost tossed it without reading, but something told me to look. Closure, maybe. Or just curiosity. The letter started formally, like he was writing a resume. "Eric, I know I don't have the right to reach out, but I hope you'll read this anyway." He went on to explain how he'd fallen into debt, how Ray had convinced him I was being selfish and needed a reality check. He claimed he hadn't meant to threaten me, just wanted to scare me into coming home. That phrase stuck with me. Coming home? What home? The one that used me? Mocked me? Treated me like a human wallet? At the end of the letter, he wrote something that almost made me laugh. "You're still my son, and I'll always love you, even if you don't forgive me." And that's when I realized he didn't get it. None of them did. They thought this was about forgiveness, about hurt feelings, about a family spat. It wasn't. It was about boundaries. And I had finally drawn mine in concrete. I never replied to the letter. Instead, I slipped it into a manila folder, tucked it into a filing cabinet, and turned the key. And I didn't think about it again. It's been a year since I walked away. I've built something better now. A new kind of family. One built on mutual respect, on time freely given, not extracted. I host game nights. Cook for people who bring dessert without being asked. I laugh without wondering what's being whispered in the next room. The funny thing is, I don't even miss them. Not Ray. Not Nate. Not my dad. They taught me a valuable lesson. Generosity means nothing if it's expected. And love? Real love doesn't require proof of payment. I'm no longer an ATM. I'm not a cautionary tale, either. I'm just me. And for the first time, that's enough. Christmas has always been a weird holiday in our family. Not bad, just weird. Like, we'd go all out with lights and decorations, but somehow the cheer never quite made it inside the house. There was this invisible hierarchy to everything. Who brought what dish? Who sat where? Who was in and who was just around? I used to be part of the in group. Before my brother's fiancé came into the picture. Before mom decided she finally had the daughter she always wanted. Before my quiet success stopped being something they bragged about and started being something they mocked behind closed doors. I'm Evan, 31, and I work in IT infrastructure. Nothing flashy, but solid. I moved out at 22, never needed a cent from anyone, and I always showed up for family stuff with gifts and goodwill. Until it slowly became clear that I was just a backup plan. Useful, but never welcome. It started small. One Thanksgiving, my name card at the table was Ethan. Everyone laughed. "Just a joke," Mom said, waving it off. Next year, I didn't have a name card at all. "Oh, we figured you'd sit near the kids." Christmas gifts turned into funny gag presents while everyone else got thoughtful stuff from the registry. "You're so hard to shop for, Evan," they'd say, after handing me a mug that said, "World's okayest brother." And I swallowed it. Every year I swallowed it. Because I didn't want to be that guy, the one who makes Christmas awkward. But this year, something was different. Maybe it was how peaceful life had felt once I started spending more time alone. Maybe it was realizing I'd built a life that didn't need their approval anymore. Or maybe it was the moment I walked into the living room, arms full of nicely wrapped presents, and saw everyone else already seated around the big dining table. Plates, glasses, name cards, laughter. Except for one empty space. And it wasn't at the table. It was in the garage. Folding chair. No plate. No name card. Just a paper napkin and a lukewarm mug of cider on a metal workbench. "That's your seat, honey," Mom said without even turning around. She was mid-toast, eyes shining at my brother and his fiancée, who had just gotten engaged in November. "Figured you'd be more comfortable out there. The dining room's a bit full." My brother, Kyle, grinned at me like he'd just been handed a gift. "Hey, even Max made the table before you," he joked, patting the family dog, who sat on a booster cushion between two cousins. Everyone laughed. Even Dad gave a weak chuckle as he sipped his wine. I stood there for a second, blinking, holding a nicely wrapped gift that I'd spent 2 weeks choosing. A custom print of an old childhood photo of me and Kyle with Grandpa, digitally restored and professionally framed. I had even paid extra for the engraving on the back, for the days when we still had each other. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I just walked to the tree, set the gift down near the others, and quietly stepped back. I scanned the room again. People talking, eating, clinking glasses. Some were giving me awkward glances, but no one said anything. My cousin Melissa shot me a tiny shrug. She was always the most decent one. Then I noticed something. Every plate had a name under it. Carefully handwritten tags. Even the dog's bowl had one. I looked over to Kyle's spot. His card was tucked neatly under his charger plate. That's when the idea hit me. I had something they didn't know about yet. 2 weeks prior, Kyle had asked me for a favor. Said he was applying for a condo with his fiancée and needed someone with good credit to co-sign. Just temporary, he'd promised. Until the paperwork clears. I wasn't thrilled about it, but he'd guilt-tripped me in front of the family. Mom going on about how family helps family and how you'd want the same for your future spouse. Against my better judgment, I agreed, but with conditions. I drafted a formal co-signing agreement, printed it, and handed him a copy. Just to be safe. He didn't even read it. Just signed. It was all there. Terms, deadlines, and a clause that allowed me to pull out of the agreement if certain conditions weren't met, including disrespect or public humiliation. I turned to him now, still holding my coat. "Make sure you read what's under your plate," I said quietly. He blinked. "What?" I didn't repeat myself. I just walked toward the front door, my shoes soft on the hardwood. I didn't look back, but I heard it, someone flipping over the name card. A pause, then a confused voice. "Wait, what is this?" Then louder. "Kyle, what is this? Did you sign this?" Someone else read it aloud. "In the event of public humiliation or mistreatment during a family gathering." And then chaos. I heard Mom snap, "What is this nonsense?" And Kyle shout, "He can't do that, can he?" Chairs scraped. Voices rose. And I kept walking. I was halfway down the driveway when the first scream came. Not rage, panic. I didn't stop. I kept walking until I reached my car. The cold night air was biting, but it felt cleaner out there, crisper, more honest. I slid into the driver's seat and shut the door, muting the chaos behind me. For a moment, I just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the wreath on the front door as it jiggled from the force of someone stomping through the hallway inside. More shouting followed, muffled but unmistakable. Then my phone buzzed. First message. Kyle texted, "What is this?" Second, Mom texted, "This isn't funny, Evan. You're ruining Christmas." I muted it. They'd figure it out eventually. The document under Kyle's plate wasn't just some prop. I had emailed a signed copy to our lawyer friend, Angela, the day Kyle signed it. She'd witnessed it. It wasn't a bluff. The clause gave me full authority to cancel the agreement if any of the outlined triggers were met. And public humiliation during a family gathering was written in bold, with examples. Banished to eat separately was literally listed. I remember typing it out with a half smile. not really believing I'd need to use it. But here we were. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw the curtains rustle in the living room window. Someone was watching, probably Melissa. I wouldn't blame her for not stepping in. She knew how things went in our family. Rocking the boat just meant getting thrown overboard. I pulled out onto the street and drove slowly at first, not really sure where I was going. The streets were mostly empty, just a few other cars, probably other people doing the same thing I was. Escaping. 15 minutes later, I was parked at a diner on the edge of town. Cheap coffee, a half-decorated fake tree in the corner, and a waitress named Cheryl who called me sweetheart and didn't ask why I was there alone on Christmas Eve. I ordered a turkey sandwich and fries, then opened my phone again. The group chat was blowing up. Dad texted, "Come back and explain this nonsense. You're embarrassing your brother." Kyle texted, "Undo it. Right now? I already paid the deposit." Mom texted, "He's just upset, Evan. Don't make this bigger than it is." Funny how the tone had shifted. No more jokes. No more smirks. Now they wanted me to come fix the mess. Like always. Only this time, I'd made sure the mess belonged to them. I didn't respond. I just stared at the screen until a new message popped up. Melissa texted me privately, "You okay?" That was brutal, but deserved. I replied, "I'm fine. Thanks for not laughing." She sent back a heart emoji. That's the thing about moments like this. You start to see who's really watching, who's quietly hoping someone will finally stand up and say enough. I didn't need them to grovel. I didn't even need an apology. I just needed space and peace, and maybe to remind them that I wasn't just a placeholder in their perfect little holiday photo. When I got back to my apartment later that night, I opened the fridge to grab a beer and saw the pie I had made for Christmas dinner. Pumpkin bourbon. I was the only one in the family who actually enjoyed baking. I pulled it out, sliced a piece, and sat at the counter in silence. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't look. I'd set the wheels in motion. The clause would trigger an auto-reversal on the cosign application by morning. Kyle and his fiancée would be without a condo unless they had a backup. They didn't. I knew that because I was the backup. Always had been. Until tonight. The next morning, I woke up to 14 missed calls and a few voicemails, each angrier than the last. I didn't listen to any of them. Instead, I made myself coffee, opened my laptop, and pulled up the confirmation email from Angela. She had already processed the withdrawal of my cosigner status. The email chain with the condo association showed they had received official notice that I was exercising my contractual right to nullify the agreement, effective immediately. Kyle's deposit? Non-refundable, unless they had another qualified cosigner by 5 p.m. the next day, which they wouldn't. Not without scrambling. Not during a holiday weekend. And certainly not with that credit score. It wasn't revenge. Not really. I hadn't lied. I hadn't tricked anyone. I'd simply made sure the pattern wouldn't repeat itself. That this time, the cost of disrespecting me wouldn't be invisible. Around noon, Melissa called, not a text this time. I picked up. "You good?" she asked softly. No lecture. No guilt trip. "I'm actually great," I said, sipping coffee. "Haven't felt this light in years." There was a pause. "It was bad last night. After you left. Mom lost it." She screamed at Kyle for not reading what he signed. Then she screamed at Dad for not stopping you. Kyle said it was just a joke, that you were being sensitive. But then your letter. "What letter?" I cut in. "The envelope under his plate. You left a second thing under there, right?" I blinked. "No, I hadn't. Just the legal document." She continued. "Well, someone found an envelope taped under the table. Said, to Kyle in red ink. Inside was a copy of the picture you gifted him, but it was torn in half. And on the back, you wrote, 'We used to be brothers. Now you're just paperwork.'" I almost dropped my mug. "I didn't write that," I said, stunned. "I didn't even use red ink." Melissa was quiet for a second. Then she said, "That's weird, because it was definitely your handwriting. Everyone thought it was part of the revenge." Kyle lost it. Started tearing up the wrapping paper under the tree. Said you ruined everything. Your mom started crying. It was like they saw you for the first time and couldn't stand it. I exhaled slowly. "I didn't leave that note, Mel." "Well, whoever did," she said. "They gave you the best exit I've ever seen." Later that day, I got an email from Kyle's fiancée. I almost deleted it on sight, but curiosity got the better of me. "Evan, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and that's fair. But I just want to say that I'm sorry for how we treated you. I saw how uncomfortable you looked yesterday, and I should have said something. Kyle made it sound like you were overreacting. But the way you left? The silence afterward? It was louder than anything you could have said. I've never seen him scared like that. I know you don't owe us anything. I just wanted you to know. I think you did the right thing. Lara. It surprised me, maybe more than it should have. I didn't expect anyone in that house to acknowledge anything. But there it was. An apology. From the one person who didn't know me. I didn't reply. I just sat with it. That evening, the messages turned from rage to desperation. Mom texted, "Don't do this to your brother. He's your family." Kyle texted, "You're seriously ruining my future over a chair? Grow up." Dad texted, "You made your point. Come fix this." Fix it. No. That part of me. The fixer, the appeaser, the one who absorbed the jokes, the jabs, the second-class treatment just to keep peace. That part was gone. Maybe it vanished somewhere between the garage seat and the name cards. Or maybe it burned away the second I walked out and didn't look back. But I wasn't done yet. There was still one move left, one they wouldn't see coming. I waited until the following morning. Let the tension simmer. Let them stew in the uncertainty. I didn't block anyone, not yet. I wanted them to see me not responding, to feel the discomfort of silence. I wanted them to finally notice the gap I'd left behind, not just fill it with more noise and excuses. At exactly 9 a.m., I composed a short, polite email address to the condo association's leasing manager. I CC'd Angela and Lara, Hal's fiancée. Just facts. No emotion. No drama. Dear Ms. Halperin, this is formal confirmation that I have exercised the termination clause of the co-signer agreement filed on December 2nd. For Section 3, Paragraph B, this termination is effective immediately due to contract breach under subsection defamation or public humiliation resulting in reputational or emotional harm. I trust that, moving forward, all communication and obligations regarding this lease application will be handled directly by the applicants, Kyle and Lara. Please confirm receipt. Sincerely, Evan Carter. 5 minutes later, a reply, received and acknowledged. Application marked incomplete due to loss of primary cosigner. Deposit non-refundable, pending appeal or new guarantor by 5 p.m. today. Another 5 minutes after that, Cole called. I didn't answer. Then Lara called. I paused. Let it ring once. Twice. 3 times. Then I picked up. Her voice came through fast, breathless. Evan, hey, I'm sorry. I know you don't owe us anything. Is there any way you'd consider reversing it? Just for a day or two? I could hear Kyle in the background, yelling. Something about not begging this guy, and this is manipulation. I recognized that tone. Entitlement dressed as wounded pride. I stayed calm. I'm not doing this to punish you, I said quietly. But you both knew the terms. And Kyle knew what he was doing. She hesitated. I didn't know about the clause. I sent him 2 copies. I replied. One for him, one for you. He said he'd share it. A beat of silence. Then, quietly, he never did. That didn't surprise me. I'm sorry you're in the middle of this, I said. Truly. You've been more decent to me in the last 48 hours than my entire family has in the past 5 years. But this isn't something I can undo. I expected her to hang up, but she didn't. Instead, she said, you were never the problem. That's the part that kills me. You always brought the best gifts, showed up on time, never asked for anything. Kyle's always been the favorite, and still, he resents you for existing. I didn't know what to say to that. So I just listened. I think I've been making a mistake, she said, softer this time. Not just about the condo. About the man I agreed to marry. That caught me off guard. I wanted to offer comfort, but I knew it wasn't my place. I didn't want to be her rebound reality check. I just said, you deserve someone who doesn't keep you in the dark. We ended the call soon after. No promises. No apologies needed. Just an understanding. An echo of respect where there used to be none. But that wasn't the last call I made that day. After hanging up, I pulled up another document, one I hadn't touched in over a year. The trust fund ledger. Grandpa had left behind a modest inheritance, split between me and Kyle. But the disbursement was staggered, held in trust until we hit 35. Until then, I was the executor. Grandpa had trusted me to oversee it. Probably because I was the only one who visited him every week, brought him groceries, and didn't treat him like an old coat you wear for sympathy points. I stared at the account for a long time. Then I called Angela. Hey, I said, I'm not touching the principal, but is it within my rights to pause Kyle's access to quarterly interest disbursements based on conduct? Angela didn't even hesitate. Absolutely. The trust terms give you discretion in cases of misconduct, negligence, or financial recklessness. I've read the clause myself. And that includes public disrespect? I asked. If you document it properly? Yes. I closed my eyes. Then opened them. Good. Let's initiate a freeze. Send me the forms. Let the condo collapse be a crack. This would be the aftershock. I signed the paperwork by noon. A single digital signature, and just like that, Kyle's access to the trust fund income was frozen. The last quarterly disbursement he received had paid for the engagement ring, a pricey rooftop proposal, and a non-refundable wedding deposit at some vineyard he couldn't pronounce. He had plans to use the next payout for the honeymoon. He mentioned it during Thanksgiving dinner, boasting about the Maldives. You know, Evan, he'd said, swirling his wine, some of us don't wait till we're ancient to enjoy life. I had just nodded. But now, thanks to his own arrogance, the next deposit would never arrive. Not unless I signed off. And I had no intention of doing that. Angela emailed to confirm everything had been executed legally. She also reminded me to brace myself for the fallout. She didn't need to. I'd been bracing for it since the moment I got banished to the garage. That evening, I got the call I'd been expecting, but not from who I thought. It was Dad. He didn't yell. He didn't scold. His voice was tired. And that shook me more than I expected. Your mother's been crying all day, he began. I said nothing. She says she didn't mean it, that she didn't realize how far things had gone. Still, I said nothing. He sighed. Kyle's furious, of course. Says you're ruining his life over a seat at the table. A pause. Are you? I let that hang for a beat, then finally spoke. Dad, it wasn't just the seat. It never is. It's the fact that she pointed at a garage chair like it was normal. It's the way Kyle made the joke and no one blinked. The way you sipped your drink and looked at the wall. It's been years of that. I could hear him breathing on the other end. Slowly. Like he wanted to say something but didn't know how to package it gently enough. I didn't know, he said. I felt my jaw clench. You didn't want to know. There was no rebuttal. Just silence. Then quietly, I guess I thought you didn't mind. That hit harder than it should have. The idea that my ability to endure something had been mistaken for acceptance. Well, I did, I said simply. And now I don't. Dad didn't fight me. He just said, I wish it hadn't come to this. Me too, I replied. But it did. And with that, I ended the call. I thought that would be the last of it for a while. I figured the cold front had settled and would linger like an early frost. I was wrong. 3 days later, I got a message from Melissa. Just 2 words. Check this. She sent a link. It was a GoFundMe. Help Kyle and Laura save their dream home. There was a grainy photo of them smiling, arms around each other, and a caption that spun the entire situation as a heartbreaking betrayal by a jealous family member. They'd raised $642 in 2 hours. I laughed out loud in my living room. Jealous? Really? The comments were worse. Who would do this to their own brother? Blood doesn't mean family. Sounds like someone needs therapy, not revenge. Most of the donations were from family friends. A few from extended relatives who didn't know the full story. Or any of it. I considered ignoring it. But the GoFundMe used my full name. I could have sued them for defamation, technically. But that would have made everything worse. So I did the next best thing. I wrote a post. A single, calm, factual post. No drama. No insults. Hi everyone. I see there's been some confusion around Kyle and Lara's housing situation. I won't engage in a back and forth, but I want to clarify a few things. 1. Kyle asked me to co-sign for his condo application. I agreed, under a legally binding agreement with clear conditions. 2. One of those conditions was that I reserve the right to withdraw if I was publicly disrespected during a family event. That condition was met, with multiple witnesses. 3. I exercised my legal right to withdraw. No threats were made. No revenge was taken. Just accountability for behavior. 4. I am not jealous. I own my own home, debt-free, and I'm happy with my life. This isn't about envy. It's about boundaries. 5. Using my full name on a public fundraising page without my consent is a legal violation. I respectfully ask that it be removed. I wish Kyle and Laura well. Truly. But it's time my family learned that kindness is not weakness and silence is not permission. Evan. It went viral. The GoFundMe was deleted within an hour. But the damage was done. People started messaging me privately, cousins, old friends, even a couple of Kyle's groomsmen, telling me they'd seen how things had been building for years. That they admired me for standing up. That I'd done what they never could. Then came the message from Laura. He lied to me. Evan, About everything. About the paperwork, about you, about the money. He told me you were bitter and selfish. But now I see he's the one who's been using everyone. I called off the wedding. I'm moving in with my sister. I just wanted to say thank you for showing me who he really is. I hope you find peace. You've earned it. Laura. I sat on that message for a long time. Not because I didn't believe her, but because it made me feel something I wasn't used to. Closure. Not revenge. Not triumph. Just peace. I didn't reply. She didn't need me to. Her words said enough. And then finally, Christmas passed. New Year's came. I didn't hear from my parents. Or Kyle. Not a word. No apologies. No explanations. But I didn't need them anymore. I hosted a small dinner at my apartment on New Year's Eve. Melissa came. So did a few friends. We toasted with champagne, ate pie, and laughed until midnight. I gave Melissa the restored photo of me and Kyle and Grandpa. You sure you don't want to keep it? She asked. I shook my head. Nah, that version of us doesn't exist anymore. She gave me a sad smile. Maybe it never did. I nodded. That night, I slept with the windows cracked open, the winter air creeping in just enough to remind me the cold doesn't last forever. Sometimes, it just clears the air. And for the first time in years, I woke up on January 1st feeling free. Not out of revenge, but out of relief. No more garage seats. No more silence. No more playing the role of the good son while being treated like the family afterthought. This time, I chose the table. And if they don't make room for me, I'll build my own. I'm Alex. I'm 29. And if you'd told me 5 years ago that I'd be sitting in a courtroom being sued by my own parents for $500,000, I would have laughed. I always thought we were a close-knit family. We did Sunday dinners. My mom still mailed me birthday cards with cheesy jokes inside. My dad gave me his old toolbox when I moved out. Normal stuff. But somewhere between my sister's big dreams and my parents' warped sense of family loyalty, everything cracked wide open. I didn't even see it coming. It started when my younger sister Lila turned 25. She's always had this princess aura, the kind of person who speaks in statements that sound like demands, but you're never quite sure until she gives you that expectant look. She had been bouncing between jobs since college, never staying long enough to figure out if she even liked them. One week, she wanted to run a bakery. Next, it was interior design. Then she got obsessed with crystals and said she needed a peaceful space to align her energy. That was the phrase she used when she told my parents she wanted to move out, but not into some apartment. No, Lila needed a real house with a backyard and space for manifestation. I thought she was joking. My parents didn't laugh. They nodded. They actually nodded. Like it made perfect sense that someone with no job, no savings, and no clue was suddenly ready to own a home. I brushed it off. I figured they'd offer her some help with rent or maybe co-sign a lease. But then one night, I got a call from my mom. Her voice was calm, cheerful even. Can you come over for dinner next Saturday? We have something important to discuss. I should have known. You don't get called in for a family discussion unless something's already been decided behind your back. I showed up that weekend with a bottle of wine, expecting maybe a chat about holiday plans or, worst-case scenario, a group intervention for Lila's new obsession with chakra alignment. Instead, I walked into a full meal laid out like a celebration. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, wine glasses already poured. Lila was practically glowing. Dad patted the seat next to him. We have some exciting news. Mom handed me a thick envelope. We bought Lila a house. I blinked. You what? Lila beamed. It's perfect. 3 bedrooms, a little garden out back, and only 10 minutes from that yoga studio I like. I just stared at them. It was like the room had tilted slightly, and everyone was speaking a language I didn't know. My parents? The same people who told me to take out student loans for college because we believe in self-reliance. Who made me work part-time all through school to cover my own expenses. Who refused to help with my first apartment, saying, "It's time you learn how to budget." They bought my sister a house. But that wasn't the worst part. Not by a mile. Mom clasped her hands together. It's in both your names. Well, technically, the mortgage is in yours. I felt my stomach drop. Dad leaned in, like he was giving me financial advice. Your credit score is strong. We figured this would be a good family investment. Lila's still working on hers. I pulled the papers out of the envelope. Mortgage documents, co-signer agreements, legal paperwork, all filled out, all ready for me to sign. You want me to take out a mortgage for her? My voice cracked. Are you serious? Lila scoffed. It's not for me, it's for us. Family helps family. I looked back and forth between them. My heart was pounding, not from anger, not yet, but from confusion. Was this a joke? Was there a camera somewhere? Why would I do that? I asked. Mom's smile faded. Because family means sacrifice, Alex. We've always believed in supporting each other. You're in a position to help. It's just paperwork. That word, just, sent a spike of heat up my spine. Just paperwork. Just a $500,000 debt tied to my name. Just risking my financial future for someone who'd never held a steady job for more than 6 months. I set the papers down. I'm not signing anything. Lila looked insulted. Wow. So much for being the responsible one. Dad's tone shifted. He dropped the friendly act. You wouldn't be where you are without us. We raised you. We gave you everything. All we're asking for is a little help. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'd worked my way through college, built a stable career in tech, lived frugally, paid off my loans early, all because I had to. They made me. Now, when I'd finally found some financial peace, they wanted to drag me into $500,000 of debt. I stood up. No, I'm not doing this. The rest of the dinner was tense. Lila cried. Mom called me selfish. Dad made some vague threat about disrespect and how I was turning my back on family. I left without dessert. I thought that was the end of it. I figured they'd cool off, maybe sell the house or rent it out to cover the payments. I stopped taking calls for a few weeks, needing space to breathe. But then I got a letter, a formal one, with a law firm's letterhead. My parents were suing me. Specifically, they claimed I had promised to support the family by co-signing the mortgage, and when I backed out, they were left with damages, namely, the $500,000 loan they had taken out in my name without my permission. The house had already been purchased. Somehow, I still don't fully understand how. They used some forged documents and an old power of attorney I'd signed during college to list me as a guarantor. And now, they wanted the court to make it official. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I stared at the letter, sitting on the edge of my bed, reading the words over and over. Lila had posted a selfie from her new kitchen just the day before with the caption, "Manifestation works." I hired a lawyer the next day, the kind that doesn't smile much, which honestly made me trust him more. He read the letter, leaned back, and said, "You've got a real mess here." The legal process dragged for months. My credit got flagged. I had to freeze my accounts. I couldn't even apply for a loan for my own place while this was pending. Every family gathering was a landmine. At Easter, Mom cornered me and whispered, "You could end this whenever you want. Just do the right thing." I laughed in her face. I had to. It was that or scream. The court date finally arrived. I wore my best suit. My lawyer had coached me through every possible outcome, but nothing could prepare me for seeing my parents on the opposite side of a courtroom, sitting behind their lawyer like they were the victims. Then the judge walked in. Middle-aged, steely eyes, no-nonsense vibe. He flipped through the paperwork for a long time. The courtroom was silent. My heart pounded in my ears. Finally, he looked up, peering over his glasses at my parents. Then he turned to their lawyer. "I have just one question," he said, tapping the papers with his pen. "If the defendant never signed these documents, and you admit they were completed before he saw them, then what exactly are you basing this claim on?" Their lawyer froze. He opened his mouth, and nothing came out. And right then, in that exact moment, I felt something shift. Not just in the courtroom, but in me. Everything was about to change. The silence in the courtroom stretched on like an eternity. I sat there, watching their lawyer fumble with his notes, his lips twitching like he was searching for the right words, but couldn't find any. My parents didn't seem to understand what had just happened. My mom looked from him to the judge, confused, and my dad sat stone-faced, arms crossed, like he was still confident this was all going to go their way. But I knew the look on the judge's face. It was the look of someone who saw through the act. The judge leaned forward, resting his elbows on the bench. "You're alleging that your son, the defendant, entered into a binding financial agreement involving a mortgage, an agreement for which you provide no valid signature, no consent, and no confirmed communication? And you're asking this court to enforce that based on a conversation?" My parents' lawyer stammered, "We, have witness statements." "From whom?" The judge interrupted, sharply. "From the co-beneficiary? The sister who now lives in the house in question." The lawyer looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. He gestured to my sister, who was seated behind my parents in a pale pink blouse and too much perfume. She gave a small, nervous wave like this was a PDA meeting. The judge stared at her for a moment, then turned back to the lawyer. Let me rephrase. You're asking me to enforce a $500,000 debt against someone who never signed anything, never verbally consented, and whose credit was leveraged based on a forged document. He tapped the file again. A document, I might add, that was based on a 10-year-old limited power of attorney for a completely unrelated matter? My lawyer didn't even need to speak. He just glanced at me, then sat back and let the judge keep going. What I'm seeing here, the judge said slowly, deliberately, is a pattern of entitlement, poor judgment, and at the very least, fraudulent behavior. If I dig further, I may find cause for criminal charges, not just a civil dismissal. My mom visibly paled. My dad shifted in his seat for the first time. The lawyer raised his hands. Your Honor, perhaps we could. No, the judge snapped, voice sharp and cold. You've wasted this court's time with a frivolous and frankly insulting case. This is an abuse of the legal system. Unless you can produce actual evidence within the next 5 minutes showing this man willingly accepted $500,000 of liability, I am prepared to rule on this today. The lawyer turned and looked at my parents like he wanted to strangle them. My mom whispered something, panicked, her eyes darting around the room. My dad just shook his head. I could tell he still didn't understand. In his mind, family meant ownership. If he raised me, he owned a piece of me. If they paid for school lunches and took me to soccer practice, they were entitled to my bank account forever. It made me sick. The judge stood up. I'll give you 5 minutes to confer. After that, we'll reconvene for my ruling. They huddled with their lawyer, whispering intensely. My sister sat alone behind them, staring down at her phone. She didn't say a word. No apology. No guilt. Just scrolling through her notifications like she wasn't sitting in the middle of a disaster her entitlement had caused. I felt nothing toward her in that moment. Not even anger. Just emptiness. My lawyer leaned toward me and murmured, "They're going to fold. They'll offer to drop it before you can sue them for damages." I didn't say anything back. I was still trying to understand how we got here. How the same parents who used to pack my lunch every morning could look me in the eye and try to ruin my life to cover their poor financial decisions. All for Lila. Always for Lila. The judge returned to the bench. Mr. and Mrs. Bradford, do you wish to proceed? Their lawyer stood up slowly. Your Honor, after reviewing the documentation, the plaintiffs would like to withdraw their claim. The judge nodded. Very well. Case dismissed. I felt a weight lift from my chest that I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. I hadn't lost everything. My credit would recover. My finances would bounce back. But my relationship with my family? That was a different story. As I stood to leave, my mother rushed up to me, grabbing my arm. Alex, please, you don't understand what kind of pressure we've been under. I pulled my arm free. I understand perfectly, I said. You saw me as a bank account, not a son. She looked like I'd slapped her. Dad didn't say a word. He just glared at me like I'd betrayed them, like I was the one who had dragged them into court. And then, behind them, Lila stood. She opened her mouth as if to say something, maybe to apologize, maybe to justify, but I walked past her without stopping. She didn't follow. That night, I sat in my apartment, small, rented, nothing fancy, and let it all sink in. I had no family now, not really. Not the kind that loves unconditionally. But I had something better. I had freedom. I had peace. I had control over my own life. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, I'd be making a phone call that would change everything for them. Because while the civil case was dismissed, my lawyer and I weren't done yet. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I hadn't slept much, but my mind felt clear in a way it hadn't in weeks. Months, even. The last of the courtroom's echoes still rang in my head. The judge's voice, calm but sharp. My mother's voice, desperate. Lila's silence. But there was no guilt. No second guessing. Just quiet resolve. I made coffee, sat at my tiny kitchen table, and opened my laptop. I still had the folders. Every document. Every forged signature. Every transaction involving my name. What they'd done wasn't just a betrayal. It was fraud. Identity theft. Bank fraud. And while I'd always seen myself as someone who avoided conflict, someone who didn't push too hard or rock the boat, that person didn't live here anymore. I opened an email draft to my lawyer. Subject line, next steps. Attached every file I had. Mortgage paperwork. Bank statements. power of attorney from college that they'd misused, screenshots of texts, notes from every call I'd had with them since this mess began. Everything. Before hitting send, I hovered for a second. Was I really going to do this? Then I remembered sitting in the bank weeks earlier, trying to figure out why my credit report had a $500,000 mortgage I'd never applied for. I remembered the pit in my stomach, the sweat in my palms, the rising panic, the feeling of being trapped. I hit send. Within an hour, my lawyer responded. Let's talk today. We'll start with filing a police report and a complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. If they want to play games, they chose the wrong one. I closed the laptop and sat back. This wasn't about revenge anymore, not entirely. It was about justice and making sure they never did this to anyone again. A week passed before anything major happened. My parents didn't reach out. Neither did Lila. I heard from a distant cousin that they were laying low, and that Lila had stopped posting her usual daily affirmations and boomerangs from her back patio. I hadn't told anyone what was coming. Not yet. Then I got a call. Mr. Bradford, said a deep, serious voice. This is Detective Moretti from the Financial Crimes Unit. We've received your attorney's documentation. I have a few questions for you. He was calm, direct, and surprisingly patient. He asked if I knew when the forged documents were submitted, if I had any evidence that my parents had access to my old paperwork, and whether I'd ever agreed, verbally or in writing, to be involved in the mortgage. I told him everything. He said, "This isn't going away quietly. If what you're telling me checks out, and so far, it does, there could be felony charges. Just be prepared for pushback." Pushback came 2 days later. My mom showed up outside my apartment. She was standing there when I came home from work, wearing one of her good coats, holding a Tupperware of homemade soup like we were still on good terms. "Hi, sweetheart," she said softly. I didn't say anything, just walked past her, keys in hand. She followed. "Please don't do this. Your father's already stressed. Lila's devastated." I unlocked my door, but didn't open it yet. "You forged my name on a $500,000 mortgage." Her expression flickered. "We didn't forge anything. We filled out the forms and submitted them without telling me." She looked around like someone might be watching. "You know your sister needs help. She can't do this alone. You're the only one who's ever been successful. Is this really what you want? To destroy your own family?" I turned and looked her dead in the eye. "You already destroyed it." Her face collapsed. She reached out like she wanted to hug me, but I stepped back. "You sued me. You lied to the court. You tried to ruin my life. And now that the spotlight's on you, suddenly I'm your son again." Her voice cracked. "We didn't think you'd go this far." That was it. That sentence. They didn't think I'd fight back. I opened the door and stepped inside. "Go home, Mom, and get a lawyer." I shut the door behind me. That night, I got a call from Lila. I hesitated before picking up, but I needed to know what she'd say. Her voice was small. No smugness. No spiritual buzzwords. Just a quiet, "Can we talk?" I didn't answer right away. She added, "I didn't know they used your old documents. I thought you'd agreed to it, like off the record. You thought I agreed to take on $500,000 of debt and just didn't show up to the closing?" "I don't know, Alex," she snapped suddenly. "They said you were fine with it. I trusted them. They're our parents." I let the silence sit. Then I said, "That trust is how they get away with everything." She exhaled. "They're freaking out. I think they know it's serious now." It was serious when they dragged me into court. Lila didn't respond to that. Eventually, she said, "Are you really pressing charges?" I didn't answer. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell her I was going to hold every one of them accountable. That I was done being the reliable one they could quietly bleed dry. That I was going to be more than a silent, obedient wallet. But instead, I just said, "I'm not playing their game anymore." And I hung up. But the truth was, this was only the beginning. My lawyer had just received a file from the mortgage company, a signed affidavit, a name, a timestamp, and something very, very interesting, a recorded phone call between my father and the loan officer. And that call, it was going to change everything. The next morning, I met with my lawyer in his office. He'd already printed out the transcript of the recorded call, and when he handed it to me, he didn't say anything, just watched my face as I read. It was worse than I expected. It wasn't just a forged signature. My dad had actually called the mortgage officer and pretended to be me. Voice lowered slightly, giving authorization to proceed. Answering security questions that were clearly pre-prepped. Making comments like, "Yes, I'm aware of the risks, and this is for my sister, so we're doing this as a family favor. And then the kicker, the part where the loan officer asked, "Can you confirm, just for the record, that you are Alex Bradford?" And my father, my own father, said, "Yes, this is Alex Bradford." It was identity fraud. Plain and simple. On tape. I handed the transcript back to my lawyer and leaned back in the chair. "That's it then." He nodded. "I've forwarded everything to the Financial Crimes Unit and the State Attorney's Office. They're moving forward. And just a heads up, when the subpoenas start coming in, it's going to get messy." I swallowed hard but nodded. Good. Over the next 2 weeks, things moved fast. The bank's fraud department launched their own internal investigation. I received notice that my name was being removed from the mortgage, not because of a kindness, but because of a confirmed violation of their own lending policies. The bank wanted nothing to do with the mess my parents had created. And then the real storm hit. I was at work when I got the call. "Alex," Detective Moretti said, "we've issued arrest warrants for your parents. Your father on 2 counts of financial fraud and 1 count of identity theft. Your mother as a co-conspirator for knowingly aiding in the submission of false documents." I didn't speak for a few seconds. "They'll be processed and released," he continued. "But the DA is serious about pursuing this, especially with the call recording." It didn't feel real. I thanked him, hung up, and sat there in silence. That night, I got a barrage of calls and messages. From extended family. From cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Some angry. Some stunned. My aunt called crying, saying, "Why would you do this to your parents?" And all I could say was, "I didn't do this to them. They did it to me." A few days later, I was served with notice that my parents were countersuing again, this time for defamation of character. My lawyer laughed out loud when he read it. Let them try. Every filing just adds fuel to our case. The hearing for the criminal charges was set for a month later. In that time, the entire dynamic of my family fractured. Lila moved back in with my aunt, claiming she felt unsafe in the house. The mortgage had defaulted. The property was in pre-foreclosure. The backyard full of manifestation crystals now sat empty, overgrown with weeds. The day of the hearing came. It wasn't a trial, just the initial arraignment, but I went anyway. I needed to see it. I walked into the courtroom and saw my parents seated up front, flanked by their new attorney. My dad looked smaller somehow. Not physically, just diminished. Like something in him had collapsed under the weight of his own pride. My mom wouldn't look at me. When the judge read the charges, fraud, forgery, identity theft, I watched my father flinch ever so slightly. It was the first time I'd seen any crack in his armor. Their lawyer tried to get the charges dropped, argued that it was a family misunderstanding, that my father acted in good faith and believed he had verbal consent. But the judge wasn't buying it. The defendant impersonated his son on a recorded line, she said. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a felony. Bail was set. They didn't go to jail, but the damage was done. After the hearing, I walked out into the hall. My mom followed. I heard her footsteps behind me, but didn't turn. "Alex," she said, her voice shaky. "Please, just talk to us. This has gone too far." I turned slowly and looked at her. Really looked at her. She was wearing the same gold necklace she always wore, the one Dad gave her for their anniversary years ago. Her eyes were red. She looked tired, older than I remembered. "You could have apologized," I said quietly. "At any point. You could have said, 'We were wrong. We messed up. We're sorry.' And I might have listened." Tears welled in her eyes. "We thought we were doing what was best for the family." "No," I said. "You were doing what was best for Lila. You've always done what's best for Lila. And when I said no, when I finally put up a boundary, you treated me like an enemy." She looked down. "We raised you," she whispered. "We sacrificed so much. And I paid for my own college." I shot back. "I paid rent while working 3 jobs. I built everything I have without you. And when I finally had something of my own, you tried to steal it." She said nothing. "I don't hate you," I added quieter now. "But I can't forgive you. Not for this." Then I turned and walked away. She didn't follow. Weeks passed. Eventually, the house was repossessed, sold off by the bank. Lila tried to claim it was unfair, but no one listened. She moved in with a friend, started posting cryptic quotes online about letting go of toxic energy and learning to cut cords. I didn't respond to any of them. My parents pleaded down the charges. They avoided jail time, got probation, and had to pay restitution, including legal fees. Their reputation in the community took a hit, though. My dad had to resign from the board of a local nonprofit. My mom stopped showing up at church. And me? I moved out of my tiny apartment. Bought a modest place in the city, nothing flashy, but mine. Fully mine. I didn't invite anyone to the housewarming. No parents. No cousins. Not even Lila. Just a few friends, some takeout, and a quiet toast to a future I built by myself. And I've never felt lighter. The last text I got from my mom came a few months later. It read, "We miss you. Please come home for Thanksgiving. Let's start over." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I turned off my phone. And I finally, truly moved on.